Stranger killings are one of the rarest and most difficult crimes to solve. So when a stranger kills twice, the pressure to find him before he strikes again is enormous. That was the challenge facing detectives and forensic officers of Task Force Midas.
A body was found lying beside the Hendra police station in a vacant lot. It was discovered by a truck driver doing a U-turn. The body was that of a female. She was laying in the fetal position. She was dressed in a black top and a pair of ankle boots only. It could be seen that rigor mortis had set into the body, which indicated to us that she had perhaps been in that location and deceased for some 4 to 6 hours. She had obvious signs of stab wounds to her stomach and her back, and it appeared that her throat had been cut. The amount of blood found at the scene, to me, was not indicative of the injuries that had been suffered by the victim. That indicated to me that perhaps the primary crime scene was elsewhere and that this crime scene was a secondary crime scene, and that being where the body was dumped.
On the examination of the secondary crime scene, we located a set of tyre tracks, which we believe drove up towards the direction of the body, appeared to do a U-turn and reverse back to where the body was, and then drive away from the body. There was also a number of footprints from what appeared to be the same shoe. These footprints appeared to come from where you would expect the driver's door to be and moved around the body and then back to where you would expect the driver's door to be. We established that the footprints at the crime scene were not left by the truck driver. This suggested to us that these tyre impressions and the footprints were more than likely the offenders.
I took photographs of the shoe sole impressions and tyre track impressions. In the future, we were hoping that we could match these up to a vehicle and to the footwear of a possible offender. We also took measurements of the width that the wheels are apart. We call this like an axle width. If we could locate a vehicle, we would compare these measurements to the wheels they have and also the axle length of the vehicle to hopefully positively identify that that vehicle had been at the scene.
But in order to identify the offender and then put him, his car and shoes at the crime scene, the detectives needed to identify the victim first.
We had nothing, no wallet or anything to assist us at the scene at the time, so I took digital photos of the deceased, and due to the clothing she was wearing, we had an idea that possibly she might have been from the Fortitude Valley area, which is the red light district of Brisbane. These photographs were sent in to detectives in there and they were able to give us a name of Jasmine Crethern, a known street worker there. Postmortem was conducted on the deceased and we located at least 14 stab wounds that we could clearly make out. Most of these stab wounds were probably around 2.5 centimetres wide. Some of them were up to 16 centimetres deep, which would indicate there was quite a grisly and aggressive attack on the deceased.
The murder weapon was most likely around 15 to 17 centimetres in length. Not a serrated edged weapon, more than likely a clean blade, possibly a clean blade on both sides, so therefore a dagger type weapon.
With no defence injuries and the toxicology report indicating there were no drugs that would have caused Jasmine to become unconscious, it was more than likely this was a surprise attack.
And because she was only partially clad, led us to believe that possibly the offender in this case could well have been a client or a customer.
However, prostitutes, due to the nature of their work, they have a large client base, which leads us to quite a large, or possibly large, suspect pool to look at.
So in order to narrow that field, as well as look at other possible suspects who may have known and wanted to kill Jasmine, detectives went to the red light district.
Once it was explained to them that we weren't interested in their day-to-day activities, that we were interested in solving a murder of a friend or an associate of theirs, they were more willing to speak to police.
We discovered that in addition to the clothing that Jasmine was found in, she was also, prior to the incident, wearing a beige short miniskirt, a beige sports type jacket and carrying a black handbag. We also learnt that an associate by the name of Renee had also lent her a black top, and we suspected that the black top was in fact hers.
That top, along with Jasmine's boots, were currently being forensically examined to see whether any DNA from the offender could be found. But now that police knew what she was wearing that night, they hoped they might find her with her killer on footage from the various cameras around the valley.
This footage was viewed. It was a quite time-consuming task, however important task. And from this footage we were able to obtain one sighting of Jasmine at the BP service station.
But in this one sighting, Jasmine was alone. It was 8:32 p.m, and police knew she would meet her killer in the next 3 to 8 hours. And one suspect had just emerged.
Our inquiries in relation to this male person found that he had just recently been released from prison, in fact for a very serious stabbing assault.
Police investigating the murder of 41-year-old sex worker Jasmine Crethurn say she was stabbed up to 20 times.
So in all, it's a very frenzied attack.
Her semi-clad body was found by a truck driver in a vacant lot on Thursday. Detectives investigating the case believe she was murdered elsewhere. Tyre marks in the dirt where Ms Crethurn's body was found are being examined.
In relation to the tyre impressions found at the scene, unfortunately there was no database concerning tyre types. It was the case that we went door to door to tyre manufacturers in the possibility of locating that tyre.
These initial inquiries we were unsuccessful in identifying the tyre. However, from the base characteristics of the tyre, the tread pattern was more than likely what they referred to in the tyre industry as a highway tread, and this was used generally on light commercial vehicles, in particular utilities and vans.
Detectives then turned their attention to the shoe impression.
We sent photographs to a police officer who maintained a database in relation to many types of shoes and styles and that sort of thing. This shoe impression was then identified to us as a T-boot, which is a common work boot used by many different people. We then contacted the distributor or the sales rep for T-boot in the Brisbane area. She then provided us with certain information, namely that sole pattern on that shoe impression had been around for some 30 years, so therefore the possibility of tracing any T-boot was going to be a dead end in regards to further inquiries. However, it may provide us with a good point of reference should a person of interest be located down the track.
One such person had just been nominated.
Information was obtained that a previous boyfriend of Jasmine's had treated her badly in the past. We conducted a number of inquiries in relation to this person, and it was from these inquiries we established that he'd committed a previous murder. Obviously this aroused our suspicion.
He was located and extensively interviewed. As a result of this interview, he was eliminated from our inquiries based on a number of reasons, namely he had a solid alibi in relation to the time frame that we had established, and further that in relation to the tyre impressions and the shoe impressions found at the scene, none of these could be linked back to him in any way that we could discover at that stage.
Another suspect came to our attention through information obtained by prostitutes from working in the Fullerton Valley area. This information related to a male person who was currently standing over a number of the girls, as well as assaulting them and dealing drugs.
Our inquiries in relation to this male person found that he had just recently been released from prison, in fact for a very serious stabbing assault.
However, like the ex-boyfriend, this standover man was eliminated from inquiries. He too had an alibi that checked out, and his footwear and car tyres didn't match the impressions left at the crime scene. But detectives now had a further piece of forensic evidence to add to their list of criteria.
We were advised that a DNA sample had been obtained from a semen stain located on the top that Jasmine Crethurn was wearing at the time she was located. We believed that this semen stain was more than likely to have come from a client. We hoped that this client would also be the offender. That DNA sample was then compared to DNA samples that are contained on the DNA database. From that, we were advised that there was no match, so we had an unknown DNA sample.
We located a number of regular clients that used the services of Jasmine. DNA was also taken from all of these regular clients voluntarily, and all of these regular clients were eventually eliminated as persons of interest.
There were two possible scenarios that Jasmine was either killed by a person that she knew or by a stranger, a client that she just met on that night. At this time of the investigation, we were fairly confident that we had spoken to most of Jasmine's male associates and had eliminated them as being possible suspects. So it led us to believe that we were more than likely looking at a stranger, someone that wasn't known to Jasmine, a client that she had met that night.
Police investigators converged on Deepwater Bend Reserve, where the woman's body was found by council workers at 7:30 this morning.
Now, 6 months later, it appeared another sex worker may have met that same client.
She was sort of bound face down No, could see stab wounds.
The workers used their own perimeter tape to cordon off the area.
Thought we'd better restrict the area, obviously, the crime scene.
Police believe the body hadn't been there long.
Every likelihood is that the person's only been here some hours.
The body was located lying face down in the car park. The body was completely naked except for a sandal that was on her left foot. There were a number of stab wounds to her back, her chest and her side. A digital image was obtained of the deceased's fingerprint, and she was identified as a 42-year-old Brisbane prostitute by the name of Julie McCall. She had a number of ropes that were tied around her legs, her waist, her hands, and she was also wearing what appeared to be a blindfold and a gag.
Julie McCall had been stabbed 24 times, and like Jasmine Crethurn, a number of those wounds were 16 centimetres deep. But this time, the actions of the killer weren't as frenzied.
The ropes hadn't been damaged in any way, which showed to me that the actions of the offender had been very methodical and deliberate.
However, those undamaged ropes were providing a possible lead.
Knowing the way that the ropes had been tied and the work that Julie did indicated to us that bondage may have been used and that the person using these ropes was experienced in bondage. Now, we were of the opinion that these were the property of the murderer. It wouldn't be items typically carried around by a prostitute waiting for a potential bondage client. And we believe that a scientific examination of those might lead us to the owner of those items and potentially the killer. We learned from our inquiries that the rope that was used to tie up Julie was a multi-plait braid cotton type rope, which is a fairly common type of rope. And on the end of the piece of rope which was used to tie her wrists, there was what are referred to as rope end clips, which are placed on the end of the rope to prevent fraying.
While the rope was common, the good news for detectives was that this rope could not be bought with these rope clips attached.
They had been crimped with a tool. We then had the future potential to find the tool which had been used to crimp those based on the impressions that the tool left.
But like the tyres and shoe impressions in the Jasmine Crethurn case, it was a matter of finding the suspect first, and a discarded cheque that had been found right next to Julie's body was their next point of call.
There's a motive here for this guy. I mean, here he is using the services of this woman, and now she's robbed him of his money.
When Julie McCall was found dead, I immediately feared the worst. I was actually at home and got a telephone call, and I immediately had a sinking feeling in my stomach that we had the same offender who'd struck again. I knew how difficult it had been in relation to the first investigation of Jasmine's murder, and I thought to myself, here we go again.
When the area surrounding the victim at Deepwater Bend Reserve was searched, there were no shoe and tyre print evidence found. This may have been due to the fact that it was raining on the night of the offence. However, right near the body, we located a scrunched up cheque. We were able to see that it was a personal cheque. This, we thought, was a great breakthrough in the case because it gave us an opportunity to identify who may have last been with the victim. The owner of the cheque was identified. His premises were placed under surveillance.
Excuse me, sir.
Upon him returning to his premises, he was interviewed at length.
Yeah,
He provided details of his contact with the deceased Julie, and he said that in a period prior to her murder, he had used her services as a prostitute, and that during that time he had been potentially drugged and had some checks stolen from him. This then gave us a thought of, well, there's their motive here for this guy. I mean, here he is using the services of this woman, and now she's robbed him of his money. However, he provided an alibi as to his movements on the night before, and we were able to verify this was the case. Now, we were also able to find out that the version he provided with regard to the theft of his cheques was in fact true. So at that stage, we really didn't have a lot more to go on, but he certainly wasn't out of the picture as such. We just needed to make further inquiries in other avenues.
Normally they walk these streets in darkness waiting for business to come to them, but fears they're being targeted by a serial killer who grabs his victims at night has them scared.
It could be any guy out here, we don't know. There's plenty of weirdos and, just safer during the day.
When Julie was found, of course, there was a lot of media in relation to the death. The media were talking about the fact that it might have been a serial killer. Our worst fears was the fact that there could be a person out there who was killing street workers. We now had 2 women who'd been murdered violently, stabbed to death in the space of 6 months, and it was quite possible that there was a person out there who could strike again. So it was decided that the most effective way to investigate this murder and the still unsolved murder of Jasmine Crethurn was to set up a dedicated task force. It was codenamed Task Force Midas, and it was set up trying to solve these two murders and to look back at two other attacks on street workers in 1998. This was the murder of Elizabeth Henry and the serious bashing of Karen Redmile.
Initially, each investigation will stand alone, and at this stage it's too early to make a comment as to whether we're looking at one person involved or a number.
One fellow streetwalker believed she may have the answer, at least to Julie's murder. Jacinda thought she may have been the last person to see her friend alive and to have met her killer.
Jacinda told us that at about 2:30 on that morning, she'd had a conversation with Julie on Brunswick Street in Fortitude Valley. They had a discussion about how quiet the night was, the weather, etc. About 20 minutes later, Jacinda was approached by a man. She had a conversation with him during which he asked for something a little bit different, and he then elaborated and said that he wanted to tie her up. Jacinda was not interested in this person's request. She then got out of the vehicle. The male person drove off and said to her, "I might be back." Sometime after that, Jacinda walked down to see where Julie was working and found that she was no longer there. Jacinda described the driver of the vehicle as male, obviously, Caucasian, fair-skinned, approximately 40, 45 years old, overweight, with a beer gut, a moustache, a fat, chubby face, and wearing a navy blue polo shirt of some description.
Her street savvy had allowed police to compile a comfit of this suspect. She then went on to describe the car.
Jacinda described the car as a fairly new two-wheel drive twin cab utility, because she stated to me that when she sat in the front passenger seat, she could place her left leg on the bitumen, which she said wasn't consistent with sitting in a four-wheel drive. She described that it had a matching canopy. It was the same colour as the body of the vehicle, and she also said that it had a Queensland registration plate.
Police then went through the same process they had with Jasmine Crethurn and obtained all the security vision in the area to see if they could identify the utility and, more importantly, its number plate.
With a stroke of luck, we found a car similar in description that drove through the valley that night. The vehicle was spotted 3 times on these tapes, and we thought, here we go, we're onto something here.
But due to the quality of the video footage, and also it was raining, we weren't able to identify a registration number, or the make and model, or the type of vehicle it may be.
We then went about a number of the Northside car dealerships with the photos to show these dealership owners to see if they could identify the type of car involved.
A general consensus after a variety of makes and models were put forward was that it was more than likely a Mitsubishi Triton, 1996 to 2001 model MK Triton.
When those working on the Jasmine Crethurn case learned about this find, they were extremely interested. And while they had yet to identify the tyre that had left the impression at the crime scene, they did know that it was likely made from one that was on a ute.
The track width of Mitsubishi Triton was compared to the track width left at the Crethurn crime scene, and they were found to be very similar. This was a further indication to us that it was extremely possible that the two murders were in fact linked. It was more than likely that we were looking at one offender for both murders.
Police believed that Julie McColl's killer was driving this Mitsubishi ute. The vehicle was caught on camera only 90 minutes after Julie was seen walking the streets. They also believed the driver was responsible for the murder of Jasmine Crethurn 6 months earlier. Detectives on that case had discovered that the width between the tyres of this model Mitsubishi ute was the same as that found at Jasmine's crime scene. It was encouraging news, but they still needed to find the tyres that made the impression.
As we'd already made inquiries with the major manufacturers, we decided to look at other avenues. These avenues led us to retreaders.
They indicated to us that it wasn't a retread tyre at all, and that perhaps it was a cheap imported tyre. We attended at one particular importer. We asked the manager if we could possibly walk through the warehouse just to examine some tyres there, because at this stage we knew the tread pattern of our tyre inside out and back to front. Whilst walking through the warehouse, we discovered the tyre, and it was a Chinese imported tyre. It had only been imported into Australia since the year 2000, that only a couple of thousand had actually been imported and sold, and that this manager was the only person who imported that tyre into Australia.
After several months of being quite frustrated with our investigation, we finally obtained a piece of evidence which we may be able to use to identify our offender.
So as detectives Paskin and Ryan began to go through the 2,000 or so possible buyers of the tyre, back at the McColl investigation, a list of several hundred registered Mitsubishi Tritons had been identified. The only problem was there was no way of telling whether the ute was a two-wheel drive with a dual cab, as seen in the security vision.
So we were looking for ways that we could narrow that field. The security footage also indicated to us that the vehicle had a number of non-manufactured features to it, and that included very distinctive pinstriping down the side, and there was a CB aerial that was discernible. There were also fog lights on the vehicle and a small nudge bar, and a plexiglass canopy on the back that was in the same colour as the vehicle. And we used these features to develop a criterion to recognise the vehicle. Our primary focus was on vehicles to the north of Brisbane, and that was essentially because the two dump sites for the two bodies were adjacent to the Gateway Arterial Road that heads north from the Brisbane River right through to the Sunshine Coast.
So as they headed back one day from checking out vehicles on the north side, they noticed a utility driving towards them on the opposite side, heading back to that crucial area. It had all the extra features police had been looking for.
At that point, we attempted to pursue the vehicle, but by the time we could get to an exit and get to the opposite side of the road, the vehicle had gone.
Meanwhile, Mitsubishi Australia were able to provide police with information to distinguish which Tritons were two-wheel drive dual-cab utilities. The list of suspect vehicles was now dramatically reduced to 160 in Queensland and to 26 in the focal area north of Brisbane.
And amongst those was one vehicle. I conducted checks in relation to that vehicle and discovered that a fellow by the name of Francis Michael Fahey had been ticketed in that vehicle. I conducted checks in relation to Mr Fahey and established that sometime previous he had been convicted of a work cover fraud offence, and a prison photo existed of him. I managed to obtain a copy of that photo, and I compared it to a confit likeness that had been prepared by an eyewitness and saw that there were similarities. We then proceeded out to the Narangba address, where we observed, sitting in the driveway, a grey MK Triton that clearly had the pinstriping that we were looking for, CB aerial, and that it had other features, including the grey canopy, consistent with the colour of the vehicle. Because the vehicle was facing towards the garage, we were unable to see whether it had fog lights or the nudge bar on the front, but we were satisfied that that was the vehicle that was depicted in that Citysat footage. We proceeded back to headquarters and put mechanisms in place to have the vehicle put under surveillance.
During surveillance of Fahey, we were able to determine that he did frequent the Deepwater Bend Reserve at Bald Hills, where Julian McColl was located. And on one such occasion, our surveillance team was able to see that in his vehicle was a pair of T-boots.
Detectives then began inquiries to confirm whether Francis Fahey could be the owner of those T-boots. With this genuine suspect now in their sights, they didn't want to blow their chances by jumping in too early and speaking with him without collecting as much evidence as they could.
It was established that Francis Fahey used to work for the Queensland Ambulance Service. Inquiries made with the sales rep for T-boots ascertained that at one point in time T-boots were supplied to the Queensland Ambulance.
Investigations were then conducted in relation to Fahey spending some time in the Rockhampton jail, and they subsequently sent us through a list of all his property that he had on him at the time of him being incarcerated. On this list, it could clearly be seen that at the time of Fahey's incarceration, he had in his possession and was wearing a pair of T-boots. Information was then received from surveillance team that the tyres located on Fahey's vehicle were in fact the same Chinese import tyre that we had located the tread of at our crime scene of Jasmine Crethurn. As a result of this, investigators became more and more confident that the murders of Julie McColl and Jasmine Crethurn were in fact linked, as we had thought. At this point in the investigation, we had established that Faye owned and wore T-boots, that he had Chinese import tyres on his vehicle that matched our crime scene, that he had knowledge of the Deepwater Bend area. The only piece of the puzzle that remained outstanding for us at this point in regards to investigations was the DNA. At this point, we placed Faye under surveillance, and as a result, a discarded cigarette butt from Faye was seized by police and subsequently analysed. As a result of this being analysed, it was found that the DNA was a perfect match to that located on the shirt of Jasmine Crethurn.
Detectives then returned to speak to the prostitute who they believed had loaned Jasmine the T-shirt. They needed to check if she had worn that T-shirt while working, and whether Francis Faye was a client of hers, which could possibly explain why his semen was on it. But Renee had realised that the T-shirt was not hers, and while the story she was about to tell police never made it beyond a committal hearing, it was important evidence at the time.
Talking to Renee in relation to the shirt, that we stumbled upon the fact that Renee had had a near-death experience herself in relation to a client.
Renee was shown a photo board, which also included a picture of Faye, and she identified that he had been a customer of hers in early 2002.
That was 6 months before Jasmine was murdered.
Renee told us that she had been picked up by Faye whilst working as a prostitute in Brunswick Street, Fortitude Valley, and that he had driven her to a location on the north side of Brisbane. She stated that they had sexual intercourse in his motor vehicle, and as she was about to redress herself, Faye produced a pair of handcuffs, identified himself as an officer with the Australian Taxation Department and that she was under arrest, and he tried to handcuff her within the motor vehicle. She was able to escape. Faye followed her in his motor vehicle and attempted to run her down.
When investigators learned about the incident with Renee, it became clear that Francis Faye's violence was increasing every 6 months. Initially with Renee, where he tried to run her over. After that, there was the murder of Jasmine, where she was stabbed 14 times. After that, there was the murder of Julie, where she was stabbed up to 22 times. It was clear that his violence was escalating.
It was now 3 months since Julie's murder, and police felt they had sufficient evidence to ensure no other prostitute would meet the same fate. A warrant was obtained for Faye's arrest, and his house searched for further evidence.
Up to 50 officers moved in at 5:30 this morning, executing search warrants. The precise raids were orchestrated by Task Force Midas. It's the special team investigating the murders of Fortitude Valley streetwalkers Julie McColl, Elizabeth Henry and Jasmine Crethurn, and the attempted murder of Karen Ann Redmile.
We are interviewing the occupants of the house. Those people are assisting police with their inquiries and continue to do so at this time.
Mate, we're part of Task Force Midas, and that task force is investigating the deaths of a number of prostitutes from the Fortitude Valley area over a period of time from 1998 onwards. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
All right.
Once we had arrived back at police headquarters, we participated in a record of interview with Faye about the murders of the prostitutes. He was quite calm and calculating during the interview.
Mate, on the way in the car, you told me that you are a regular visitor to the Valley area.
I have been, yeah.
All right.
With regards to the Valley, he indicated that he had been to the Valley late at night as he was concerned for a family member who had been frequenting the Valley.
And as far as I was aware, was originally she wasn't getting any money from Social Security, so she had to be getting the money from somewhere. My first thoughts are that because she was going down the Valley, that she was what they call a working girl.
Did you get any response from the working girls?
No.
I think you told me some were a bit pissed off when they found out you weren't a customer.
Yeah.
And you told me in the car that you've never been a customer of the prostitutes down there in the Valley?
No.
And you don't know Jasmine Crethurn or Julie McColl, who were two prostitutes who were working down there?
No.
And as I recall, you said that on occasion, or at least one occasion or two occasions, the girls actually sat in the vehicle and talked with you? Is that right?
There was a couple of rainy nights there, yeah. I mean, I'm not an arsehole, if you know what I mean. I mean, if somebody comes up and wants to chat, that's fine. I mean, they can sit in the car because I'm there to find out what's happening with my stepdaughter.
It became quite apparent that the explanation being provided by Faye was that, well, we must have known he was in the valley, hence why he provided a version as to why he's in the valley, and should we locate anything in his vehicle that may be linked to a prostitute, he gives this explanation of how if it was raining they would sit inside his vehicle.
Well, I told him, not interested, but I said, could you do me a favour? They sort of look at me, we don't do any favours, so I explained who I was looking for, and they said no, we haven't seen him.
Do you recall anything else that was said to them, or they said to you?
I was actually told what the prices were there at one stage, and they vary.
During the interview with Faye, he also openly admitted to attending Deepwater Bend, being the other crime scene. He would talk about the fact that he would go there fishing.
So where do you put in if you're going to fish the Pine River? Where do you put in from?
I put in at Deepwater Bend. I prefer to stick to the more sheltered waters. Yep. I usually find the fishing's a damn sight better. I like to fish in spots away from the fucking idiots on their jet skis and the water skiers. So I stay around that area.
This again was a way of him trying to show that, well, okay, the police know I must have been there. Well, the reason I've been there is because I go fishing there.
What Faye didn't know was how much evidence the police already had, and how much more was building since they entered his house.
Just cast your mind back to the end of February, around about the 26th of February. That's when Julie McColl was murdered on the 26th. Mm-hmm. Mate, can you tell us what you were doing on that day, or where you would have been?
I've got no bloody idea. None whatsoever. What day of the week is it?
It's a Wednesday morning.
So it's a Tuesday night, Wednesday morning sort of thing.
On Tuesday night I would have been home, I suppose, watching Law and Order if it was on.
Francis Faye had been in custody for nearly 4 hours, and at no time had he flinched in terms of his guilt.
Her name's Jasmine Gretherne. Never ever seen her before? No.
Police already had a strong body of evidence against him for the 2 murders, but they hoped they would find more in his house.
Mate, we've just got to wait for a little bit longer to get some results on some tests and that. And, they could be done by now. Mm-hmm. And it's just, mate, it won't be much longer, but we'll just have to suspend the interview, mate.
Mm-hmm. One of the very first things that we saw was a set of T-boots. In fact, there was 2 sets of T-boots at the front door of the house. These were taken away for scientific analysis. The dimensions of the shoe, the size of the shoe, the scuff and wear marks on the tread pattern matched perfectly to the shoe prints left in the dust beside Jasmine's body.
A drop of blood was found on the left T-boot. This blood was subsequently analysed and matched to that of Jasmine Gretherne.
We found a boat in the garage. The boat had an outboard motor, and tied around the outboard motor was a rope. The rope was found to be of exactly the same construction and the same material as the ropes found tying up Julie McColl's body. And the rope was also crimped with metal crimps on the end of the rope. Also, we found a crimping tool. Impressions from the crimping tool were placed into lead, and the identifying marks in the lead were then compared by microscope with the marks left on the crimps that were attached to the ropes that tied up Julie McColl's wrists. These crimp marks were found to be an identical match. The most beneficial evidentiary thing we found in Francis Faye's house was a bayonet. The dimensions of this weapon were consistent with the wounds that were caused to both Julie and Jasmine.
During the search of the house, there was a lengthy break between 2 of the interview tapes, and this is when a lot of the main information was coming in.
I'd ever smoke another cup of coffee or a glass of water.
Another glass of water.
We feel at that time that Faye was having problems, sticking to this story. He must have known that we were getting a lot of evidence that could link him to these crimes, and it was getting too much for him to bear. It was at this stage that Faye summoned us back to the interview room.
Mate, a short time ago I was called back into the room. I was told that you wanted to speak to me.
Yep.
Mate, what is it you want to talk about on this occasion?
I just want to get a lot of shit off my chest.
Mate, is it in relation to the matters that we have spoken to earlier this morning?
Yep, two only. And that's the one at Hendra and the one at Deepwater Bend.
Faye then started to talk about the death of Jasmine Crethurn. He indicated how he picked her up in the valley that night.
And this bird jumped in and wanted to know if I wanted any company. And I said, yeah, I don't mind the company. And she told me what the prices were, $50 for a blowjob. And it kind of appealed to me, so I agreed. We drove into a vacant lot. She wanted to be paid first up, and so I paid her the $50, and we walked to the back of the car and had oral sex. The condom broke, and next thing I recall is that I'm hooking along the bloody gateway to fucking Great Red of Knots. The other one, I pulled up there at the Night Owl place. I got a cup of coffee from there, and I think I got something to eat. Can't remember what I had to eat. I pulled into a side street. I think it was on the right-hand side, heading back towards the wall. Pulled up there to finish my coffee. Got a tap on the window, and this bird was offering different services and whatever. She offered to give me a blowjob for $25, I think it was. And she sat in the car with me while I was finishing my coffee, and she started, talking about what turned me on, that sort of stuff, and that led to the bondage thing. And then she suggested that we go back to her place. I said no, I wouldn't be in that. I wouldn't feel safe. And the only place I could think of was Deepwater Bend, and I told her about it, and she agreed to go. With this sort of weather, she said, I'm not going to get much business tonight. We drove to there, and I remember tying her up. I remember getting the blowjob. And next thing I remember, I'm pulled up on the side of the road underneath the bridge, and I'm using these drink bottles and cordial bottles to wash blood off my legs. And I threw my guts up. I remember doing that.
Both of these women have died from stab wounds?
Yeah.
Mate, can you tell me how these stab wounds came to be inflicted?
Well, I obviously stabbed them, but I don't have much recollection about it at all.
Do you recall what you did it with?
I think it was the bayonet blade in the car. I used to use that years ago for when I was pigging. It was good for killing the pig, Mate,
I showed you these two photos earlier and you said you didn't recognise them. I'm now going to show you two photos again. That's Julie McColl, mate, and that's Jasmine Crethurn.
So they still don't mean anything to me. Well, obviously they are the two women involved. But, I've never sort of looked at them that much. Didn't really care.
During the investigation and interview, police were able to discount Faye being involved in the murder of Elizabeth Henry and what has now become, since her death, the murder of Karen Redmill. These murders remain unsolved.
Frances Faye was charged with 2 counts of murder in relation to the deaths of Jasmine Crethurn and Julie McColl. The trial was held in September 2005 and ran for 3 weeks. Frances Faye chose not to call evidence or give evidence on his own behalf. The jury was out for 6 hours and returned a guilty verdict in relation to both counts of murder.
Frances Faye was sentenced to 2 life imprisonments to be served concurrently. He must serve a minimum of 25 years, which means he will be eligible for parole in 2028.
The verdict was welcomed by investigators who helped put Queensland's second convicted serial killer behind bars.
We hope now there's some closure for the families that were involved in what has been a very difficult investigation.
Faye's shoe prints were found at the scene of Crethurn's murder. Forensic testing matched the prints to Queensland Ambulance issue boots.
It was somewhat prophetic that the task force was codenamed Midas because everything we touched did turn to gold in terms of the evidence.
From a forensic perspective, I think this was the perfect investigation. I think every piece of evidence that we uncovered gave us a result.
It's extremely satisfying to the task force members and the whole police service that Francis Fay was convicted of these murders. I've got no doubt that if he hadn't been convicted, he would have continued to offend.
Do you feel any better or not?
To a certain degree I do, to a certain degree I don't. I mean...
Don't know why it happened?
I don't know why it happened. Because it's you know, I spent all my fucking life saving lives. Now I'm fucking taking them, and I don't know why.
They opened the box at 3 a.m. Not a real box, not with walls and a lid, but a digital one. A forgotten folder in the county server, 4 levels deep, name half cut. Homicide Unsolved CA 2003. A technician clicks, yawns, and moves on. But the file stays open on the screen, like a wound that never closed. A face stares back from an old JPEG. Slight grain, soft flash, brown hair, California sunlight behind her. The kind of photo people take without knowing it's the last one where they are still alive. Still whole. Still unbroken by a headline. Her name is Emily Hart, 21 years old, college student, part-time barista, sister, daughter, ghost. Back then, in 2003, her story was just another missing person report in a quiet coastal town that liked to pretend it was safe. Santa Aurelia, California. Population under 30,000, ocean breeze, pastel houses climbing the hills, and a main street that looked like a postcard someone forgot to mail.
The kind of place where people leave doors unlocked, where everyone knows the name of the waitress and the cop and the guy who owns the hardware store. A town that believed bad things happened elsewhere. Until one Sunday evening in September when Emily didn't come home. It starts simple, like it always does. A message that never gets answered, a phone that rings out, a mother checking the clock. 9:12 p.m. Not worried yet. College kids stay out. They study. They work. They have lives their parents only see in fragments. But time moves slowly at first, then faster, then like a runaway train. 9:43 p.m. Another call, voicemail, 10:15 p.m. Maybe she's at the library. 10:52 p.m. Her shift ended at 9:30. She should be home by now. 11:38 p.m. The first real fear, the kind that makes your fingers cold while your body is still warm. Midnight. Her father stands at the window looking down the street, watching for headlights that don't appear. Her mother sits at the kitchen table with a mug of tea that's gone cold. The house is quiet, but it's not a peaceful quiet. It's the quiet of air that's waiting to be broken by bad news. At 12:27 a.m., they call the police. On the other end of the line, the dispatcher uses the calm voice, the one they're trained to use. Maybe her phone died. Maybe she fell asleep at a friend's house. "We'll take a report, ma'am." The words are right. The tone is right. But 20 miles away, on a dark stretch of coastal highway, none of that matters. Because Emily's car is already parked there. Hazards off, keys missing, driver's door ajar like someone got out in a hurry or was pulled. Inside the car, there's a jacket on the back seat and a textbook open on the passenger side. Highlighter lines glowing faintly under the dome light left on, draining the battery, burning the scene into the night. No one has found it yet. Not the deputy finishing his shift. Not the trucker barreling past at 60 miles an hour. Not the couple arguing in a silver sedan, too wrapped up in their own private disaster to notice the abandoned vehicle in the shadows. Somewhere between the coffee shop where she worked and the small house at the end of a quiet street, Emily Hart has vanished. By sunrise, Santa Aurelia is already humming with the story. Neighbors wake up to the siren of a patrol car slicing through the morning calm. A reporter for the local paper hears the first murmur on the scanner. Possible missing 21-year-old female last seen leaving work. A teacher scrolling through early emails sees a message from a colleague. Is this the Hart girl from my intro to psych class? And at the edge of town, the first cruiser slows, stops, and angles its headlights onto a small shape by the shoulder of the road. A blue Honda Civic sitting at a strange angle, as if it just gave up halfway home. The deputy steps out. The air is cold and salty, the ocean hidden behind a low bank of fog. The road is quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every sound stand out. The tick of cooling metal, the crunch of gravel under boots, the distant rush of waves.
He approaches the car with his hand on his holster, not because he expects trouble, but because the training says, you never really know. He sees the open door first, the dome light, weak but still on, the textbook with yellow lines across paragraphs about memory and trauma. He calls out, "Hello, sheriff's office." No answer. He leans in. No purse, no phone, no keys. Just a faint metallic scent clinging to the upholstery, almost masked by the smell of old coffee and cheap vanilla air freshener. A scent he's smelled before in other cars, other scenes. Blood, not much, just a smear on the steering wheel. A small dark drop on the cuff of the jacket. A fingerprint that melted into the fabric when it was still wet. He steps back and radios in. And just like that, the missing person becomes something else, something darker, something the town will talk about for years. By mid-morning, the highway shoulder is a crime scene. Yellow tape flutters in the ocean wind. Orange cones slow traffic to a crawl. Drivers crane their necks trying to see, then speed away with a new story to tell at work. There was something going on out by mile 14, police everywhere. Detectives arrive in unmarked sedans. Crime scene techs unload their cases. A photographer with a tired face and steady hands takes picture after picture. The exterior of the car, the interior, the tire tracks, the scuffed dirt by the driver's door that could be nothing, could be everything. They swab the blood. They bag the jacket. They dust for prints. They kneel on the cold ground and look for anything that doesn't belong. A button, a piece of jewelry, a footprint that doesn't match the tread on Emily's shoes. Above them, a gull screeches and wheels away. The fog lifts slowly, revealing the shape of the hills and the faint suggestion of the town, still waking up, not yet knowing it's changed. Back on Maple Street, the Hart House is full. Family members arrive in a blur. An aunt clutching a rosary, an uncle speaking in low, firm tones that shake more than he thinks, a younger brother sitting rigid on the couch, staring at the wall. An officer takes notes while Emily's mother talks, words spilling out too fast. She left work at 9. She always comes straight home. She drives the same route. She would have called. She always calls. She wouldn't just disappear. Not Emily, not my daughter. What was she wearing? Did she have plans to meet anyone? Was she upset about anything lately? Did she mention any names, any arguments, any strange cars following her? A notebook fills with details that feel small, ordinary, meaningless. A black cardigan, blue jeans, white sneakers, a silver necklace with a tiny star, a coworker named Julie. A professor she didn't like, a customer who tipped too much and stared too long. These details will be repeated, rewritten, reinterpreted for years. Each one will be picked up, examined, turned in the light, and put back down again, still not fitting into any clear picture. For now, they are just words. By afternoon, the first news truck has rolled into town. A reporter stands on the curb in front of the police station, wind tugging at her hair, microphone in hand. A small California town is in shock tonight as authorities search for 21-year-old college student Emily Hart, last seen leaving her workplace late last night. Behind her, the station doors open and close. Detectives move in and out, faces tight. They don't like cameras. They don't like the way a case starts to belong to the public the moment it hits the evening news. But they know this story will travel with or without them. Inside, in a cramped briefing room that smells of burnt coffee and old paper, a whiteboard fills up. Timeline, someone writes across the top. 8:55 p.m. Coworker sees Emily at closing. 9:10 p.m. Customer reports seeing her locking the door. 9:20 p.m. Security camera at the corner gas station captures a blue Honda Civic heading south. Time unknown. Car pulled to side of the road, mile 14. Approx. 12:27 a.m. Mother calls police. The gaps between those times feel like chasms. Anyone could have slipped into them. A stranger, a neighbor, someone she knew, someone she didn't. As the day wears on, volunteers gather at the community center. Flyers are printed with the JPEG from the server. Emily's face, slightly grainy but hopeful. Missing, in bold black letters above her eyes. Last seen September 14th, 2003. A phone number, a plea. People who barely know her suddenly remember tiny details. I used to see her jogging past my house every morning. She served me coffee last week. She was so polite. I think she went to school with my niece. The town stitches together a version of who she was from half-remembered moments, as if knowing her more will help bring her home. Search teams fan out along the highway, through the scrubby hills and dry ravines that cut into the landscape. Deputies on horseback, volunteers in neon vests, dogs sniffing the air, pulling at leashes, helicopters thudding overhead, slow and heavy, casting brief shadows over the ground. They call her name into the wind. Emily! Emily! The hills don't answer. On the second day, rain threatens but never comes. The air stays dry, a film of dust clinging to boots and jeans, and the knees of the detectives who crouch over every scrap of trash, wondering if this is the thing, the piece, the clue that changes everything. They find beer cans, cigarette butts, fast food wrappers, the litter of 1,000 careless nights, but nothing that screams her name. Back in town, rumors bloom like mold in corners no one can quite reach. They say they found a lot of blood in the car. They say she owed someone money. They say a trucker picked her up. They say it was a jealous ex. No one knows. Everyone pretends they might. In the Hart House, the television plays the news report on a loop. A different station, a different angle, the same phrases. Mysterious disappearance. Close-knit community in shock. Authorities following all leads. Emily's mother sits in front of the screen, staring at her daughter's photo as if she can will it to move, to blink, to step out of the frame and say it was all a misunderstanding. Her father doesn't watch. He stands in the hallway outside her bedroom, hand on the doorframe, unable to go in and unable to walk away. The door is slightly open. Inside, everything is exactly where she left it. A bed unmade, a jacket on the chair, a stack of textbooks by the side table. Time has stopped in this room, even as it barrels on everywhere else. Detectives come and go. They ask more questions. They search her computer, her phone records, her bank statements. They map her last week, her last day, her last hour. Their faces set into that particular expression. Focused, but not hopeful enough to make promises they can't keep. They tell the family they are doing everything they can. And for a while, it's true. Days turn to weeks. A tip line fills with leads that look promising until they don't. Sightings that fall apart under scrutiny. A confession from a man 3 towns over who just wants attention. A piece of fabric found in a ravine that matches nothing she owned. The story that once dominated the front page of the local paper begins to shrink, first from headline to sidebar, then from sidebar to a small photo with no new leads beneath it, then to nothing at all. But the file doesn't disappear. It moves. From the desk of the lead detective to a cabinet, from the active board to the cold case shelf, from the corner of the public's mind to something else. A ghost story parents mention when their teenagers come home late. Remember that girl, the one who vanished on the highway? You be careful. In the records room, the folder thickens with memos and reports and photos. It sits there year after year, while the town keeps growing, new houses climbing the hills, new businesses opening on Main Street, new faces appearing in high school yearbooks and in coffee shops and behind the wheel of cars driving that same stretch of coastal road. The file waits. For 19 years, it waits. Until that night in the server room at 3 in the morning when someone opens the digital version and drags it into a new folder, Cold Case Review, Priority. On the screen, Emily's face appears again, grainy but defiant against the years. Underneath the photo, in the corner of the screen, a new note begins to form, typed by hands that weren't there in 2003, hands that belong to someone younger than the case itself. DNA reanalysis recommended. Possible new suspect. See attached. In the quiet glow of the monitor, in a town that thought it had learned to live with unanswered questions, a long-dead story flickers back to life. The cold case is awake. 19 years is a long time for silence, but files don't age the way people do. They just sit and wait until someone decides to listen again. The person who listens this time is not the detective who stood on the highway shoulder in 2003. He's long retired, his notes stacked in boxes in a garage that smells like oil and pine cleaner. The new eyes on the case belong to Detective Laura Ortiz. She wasn't in Santa Aurelia when Emily vanished. Back then, she was a teenager in another county watching similar stories flicker across a TV screen and wondering how people could just disappear. Now, she stands in a small fluorescent-lit office in the same town, arms folded, gaze locked on a large corkboard where old crime scene photos are pinned with fresh red pushpins. Emily's face is at the center. Everything else radiates out from it like orbiting debris. The abandoned Honda on the coastal road, the smear on the steering wheel, the jacket bagged in plastic, the blurred security still of the car passing the gas station camera, the copy of the missing flyer with its bold black missing shout. Cold Case Review. It sounds official, methodical, but underneath the acronym and procedure, it's something else, unfinished business. On the corner of Laura's desk, a cardboard evidence box sits open, newer tape crossing over brittle old tape, labels peeled and replaced. Inside are objects that haven't seen light in years, a swab kit, a sealed envelope, a pair of white cotton gloves someone wore to handle something that once belonged to Emily. Evidence that in 2003 gave them nothing. But this isn't 2003 anymore. Laura pulls on fresh gloves, the snap of latex slicing the room's hum. For a moment, the office goes very quiet. Just the rustle of paper, the squeak of her chair as she leans in, the low buzz of computers idling on other desks. She lifts out the envelope labeled in fading ink. Steering wheel swab, suspected blood, heart vehicle. Beneath it, another, jacket cuff, stain. And below that, a clear plastic tube with a cotton swab sealed inside, label wrapped around it like a paper bandage. The old detective's handwritten note is clipped to the tube. Sent to lab 2003, insufficient for full profile. Back then, DNA was powerful and limited all at once. They could see there was blood. They could say it was human. They could say it probably wasn't Emily's, but they couldn't pull a full profile, not with the tech they had, not with the amount they were willing to consume from the precious little sample. The world has moved. Technology has sprinted ahead. Cases that once sat in the dark have been dragged into the spotlight by new machines, new databases, new ways of reading what was always there. Run it again, Lara says. The lab tech raises an eyebrow. We're really doing this one? She doesn't look away from the board. We're really doing all of them. Start with heart. In the sterile glow of the forensic lab, the past is thawed and examined. Machines whir. Tiny samples vanish into chemical reactions and amplified sequences, into cycles of heat and cold that tease information out of old stains. A drop of blood becomes a string of numbers. In another room, different screens glow. A young analyst named Noah reads through archived case reports, fingers flying over the keyboard. He was 4 years old when Emily vanished. To him, 2003 is a faded childhood memory, not a year that still hurts. He scrolls past scanned memos, interviews, grainy photographs. The story he sees is jagged, incomplete. He reads how they canvassed every house within a 2-mile radius of the highway pull-off, how they interviewed coworkers, professors, classmates, how they chased rumors of a white pickup seen near mile 14, how they logged a series of calls from an anonymous tipster who claimed to have inside info and turned out to be a bored teenager. Noah highlights inconsistencies, flags gaps, tags pages. No traffic cam footage from the opposite direction, he murmurs. No plate reads. Of course there weren't. Different world. He opens Emily's last week like a map, trying to spot the wrong turn no one saw. In one report, buried among paragraphs of routine detail, he finds a sentence. Customer described as male, mid-30s, frequent visitor, possibly infatuated with victim, always sat at corner table, no name given, referred to by staff as the reader due to habit of staying late with thick hardback books. No follow-up interview attached, no sketch, just that, the reader, a ghost inside a ghost story. Noah adds a note. Locate original co-workers, ask about the reader. Back in the lab, a machine beeps. Quietly, insistently. A lab tech leans in, eyes scanning the lines on the screen. A partial profile resolves into a fuller one, like a low-resolution picture sharpening. When the report arrives on Laura's desk, it's just paper and ink, but she feels the weight of it before she even reads the first line. Suspect DNA profile, developed from historic evidence, heart case 2003. Her pulse ticks faster. They did it. 19 years later, the blood on the steering wheel and the jacket cuff gives up its secret. It belonged to someone else, not Emily, not a lab tech, not an officer, not any of the profiles they had on file at the time. Unknown male. Profile uploaded to CODIS. Now it's a waiting game. Somewhere out there, a man is living his life. Maybe he's changed his name. Maybe he's moved states. Maybe he's sitting at a breakfast table right now, staring at the same stretch of sun on a wall he's looked at for years, never imagining that a frozen moment in 2003 is about to catch up to him. Or maybe he's already been caught for something else. Maybe his DNA sits in a database, a digital fingerprint waiting to be matched to this ghost. Lara taps the bottom of the report with her nail, the rhythm quick, controlled. She doesn't celebrate, not yet. A profile is a key. But it still needs a lock. Warmer, she thinks. We're getting warmer. She calls a meeting. The cold case team squeezes into the small room again, chairs scraping, coffee cups in hand. Noah tacks the new report onto the board, a fresh white page among the yellowed ones. Unknown male profile, Lara says. Not in the original suspect pool. Not a match to anyone who handled evidence. We've got his DNA in her car, on her jacket. That's contact, that's proximity, that's our guy, or someone who was with him that night. One of the older detectives, gray at the temples, leans back with a sigh. And if he's never been in trouble since? Then he's careful. Lara's voice doesn't waver. Or lucky, or both. But the world is a lot smaller than it was in 2003. They go over the old suspect list, the jealous ex-boyfriend cleared by solid alibi, the trucker with a violent record who happened to be 3 states away, the co-worker everyone thought was too intense but whose phone records placed him at home, arguing with his roommate, a fight confirmed by neighbors, the professor who made inappropriate comments and got quietly pushed into early retirement. No matches, no easy doors to open, so they widened the circle. They pulled DNA from other unsolved cases in nearby counties, cross-checking, looking for connections, a hit, any hit. They examined cases that echo Emily's: young woman, late drive, isolated road, disappearance. For a moment, there's a flicker of dark hope. A predator linked to multiple scenes, a pattern they can map, a monster whose path explains everything. But the monster they're hunting is quieter, more careful, or more ordinary than that. Run familial, Lara says. There's a pause. They all know what that means. Checking for partial matches in the system, looking not just for the man himself, but for blood relatives whose DNA brushes against his like a shadow. It's controversial. It's powerful. It has cracked cases before. Days pass in a slow, tense rhythm. Outside the station, tourists still buy ice cream, take photos by the pier, watch the waves. Kids still race bikes down side streets, their laughter cutting through the air. Couples still sit under string lights at the seaside restaurants, clinking glasses, leaning close. Inside, the cold case room feels separated from that world, like a pocket of suspended time. Here, it is always 2003. Always that night, always the drive that never ended. Noah tracks down old co-workers. Many have left town. Some are hard to find. One is dead, car accident on a rainy freeway 5 years ago. But some pick up the phone, voices older, rougher, carrying the weight of 2 decades. Yes, I remember Emily. She was sweet, quiet at first, then funny once she knew you. It doesn't feel like 19 years. It feels like, I don't know, a bad shift I never clocked out of. He asks about routines, about regulars, about the reader. At first there's nothing, vague recollections. We had tons of regulars. Could have been anyone with a book. But then, on a crackling call with a woman now living 2 states away, a detail clicks. Oh, wait, no, yeah, I remember that guy. We did call him the reader. Middle-aged, kinda serious looking. Always ordered black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Sat alone, corner table by the window. Came in near closing a lot. Name? Noah presses. She exhales, the sound of memory straining. I think we only ever knew him as Mr. K, because one time he paid with a card and I saw the K at the beginning of his last name. He laughed and said, "Just put Mr. K, that's fine." So we did. He liked that, made it a thing. Mr. K, another shadow. Did Emily ever mention him? A pause. Once. She said he gave her the creeps, but she laughed when she said it, so I didn't think. Her voice cracks. 19 years fall into the silence between words. No receipts survive. The cafe switched owners. Records were lost, computers upgraded, old hard drives tossed, a name reduced to a letter. Still, it's more than they had. Noah adds it to the board. Unknown male DNA connects to Mr. K, the reader, with a thin red string. Not a conclusion, just a possibility. The town doesn't know any of this yet. For them, the Hart Girl case is a ghost that sometimes drifts back into conversation when the fog rolls in heavy or when a young woman doesn't text back for a bit too long. A cautionary tale, a warning about late-night drives and dark highways. But rumor has a way of sensing movement before official statements do. An officer talks to a cousin. A lab tech mentions working on an old case at a bar. Someone spots the detective pinning new pages to the cold case board through a slightly open door. Whispers start. They're reopening that cold case from 2003. The girl in the Honda, they finally found something. I heard there's new DNA, like they know who did it now. They don't, not yet, but the idea that they might is enough to rattle old nerves. Somewhere in town, or maybe far away from it, a man hears those same whispers, maybe from a news snippet on the radio, maybe from a friend who still has ties in Santa Aurelia, maybe from a random scroll through an article titled California Cold Case Task Force Targets Unsolved 2000s Cases. His heart stutters, just once, just enough, then starts again. Most people can listen to a story like Emily's and feel only sympathy, distant and sad, but the guilty feel something else. A sharp, specific fear that slots perfectly into place. 19 years is a long time, long enough to build a new life, to marry, to have kids, to move to a smaller town or a bigger city, to buy a house with a yard and a tree out front. to sit at neighborhood barbecues and nod along to the same conversations everyone has about schools and taxes and weather. Long enough to convince yourself that the night on the highway was a different person's life, a mistake dislocated from who you are now, a buried chapter, until you hear the words, "Cold case reopened." New DNA. Investigators closing in. Familial search results come back. Lara reads them slowly. There is no direct hit, no perfect overlap. But there is something else, a partial match, a relative, a man, mid-40s, living 3 counties away, arrested a few years ago on a nonviolent charge. DNA taken, stored, almost forgotten. The system says, we can't tell you who your suspect is, but we can tell you who he might be related to. The last name doesn't start with K. That would have been too neat, too easy. Instead, it's ordinary. Soft consonants, common vowel, a name that blends into phone books and school rosters and suburb mailboxes. But in the notes, in a scanned form from the man's intake paperwork, there's a line, mother's maiden name, K, a letter, a shape, A, an echo. The kind that makes a detective lean forward, eyes narrowing, sensing the shape of someone moving just out of sight. They pull records, family trees, old addresses, work histories. Bit by bit, a line appears on the map connecting another town back to Santa Aurelia, to 2003, to a small cafe on a corner where a young woman served coffee to a man who read thick hardback books and liked to be called Mr. K. The cold case is no longer just awake, it's watching. And in the quiet hours, when the office lights are low and the board gleams softly with its web of photos and lines and notes, it feels like Emily herself is there in the room, her eyes from that grainy JPEG following every move, asking the question that has hung over this town for almost 2 decades. Who was in that car with me? And what did he do after he drove away? The name comes in on a Tuesday morning, wrapped inside a stack of digital records that looks at first glance exactly like all the others. Ordinary, bland, bureaucratic. But Lara has learned that monsters like ordinary things, they hide inside them. On her monitor, a family tree branches across the screen, lines connecting names, dates, addresses. At the center, the man whose DNA nearly matched the unknown profile from Emily's car. To the right, his parents, his mother's maiden name, beginning with that letter that has been scratching at the back of everyone's mind. K. She follows it. One click opens a marriage license, another opens an ancient tax record, another a scanned lease from a narrow window of time that matters more than any of the others. 2002, 2004. Santa Aurelia. The address makes the hair on the back of her neck stand up. A rundown apartment complex 2 blocks from Emily's campus, a place long since renovated, repainted, rebranded as coastal lofts for young professionals. Back then it was just cheap rentals with thin walls and a parking lot that flooded when it rained. The tenant's name is not the man in the database, it's his older brother, male, early 30s in 2003, lived in Santa Aurelia for 3 years, employed as clerk at a small publishing warehouse on the edge of town, commute route, straight past the cafe where Emily worked, past the gas station camera that caught her car heading towards the highway, past the exit that leads directly to mile 14. Lara leans back and lets out a slow breath. Got you, she whispers. She pulls everything, employment records, driver's license, old phone numbers, archived email addresses. A DMV photo loads. Mid-30s, short dark hair, wire-framed glasses, a face you wouldn't glance at twice. The kind of man who could sit in a corner with a book and never become the center of the room. The kind of man you'd call the reader. Name, Daniel Keaton. The K that slipped through everyone's fingers. She stands, crossing the room in 3 swift strides. The board looms in front of her, a web of paper and ink and string. With a pushpin, she tacks Keaton's photo between unknown male DNA and Mr. K. The red lines connect, a closed triangle tightening around his face. The room feels different with his picture up there. Less abstract, less hypothetical. There he is, a real person, a set of eyes that once looked at Emily. Hands that might have touched the steering wheel, the jacket, the door. Noah swivels his chair, sees it, and freezes. That him. That's our best candidate for Mr. K, Lara says. Older brother of our partial DNA match, lived in town. Route puts him past her work, her path home, the highway. Age fits the coworker's description. Name fits the nickname. Time frame overlaps perfectly. Where is he now? The answer sits in another file, colder than most. A coroner's report from 6 years ago. Out of state. Heart attack on a suburban sidewalk. Collapsed while walking his dog. Pronounced dead on the scene. No suspicion, no autopsy beyond routine. Middle-aged man, natural causes. End of story. Except it isn't. The dead don't get to close cold cases. They just leave fewer answers behind. Lara stares at the report. It complicates everything. No arrest, no interrogation, no confession, no courtroom, no verdict, no cameras flashing as handcuffs click shut. Just a body already in the ground, and a question that needs to leap 19 years and hundreds of miles to land on a gravestone that doesn't say anything except, loving son. Devoted brother, gone too soon. We need his DNA, she says. How? Noah asks. He's dead, I know. Her mind is already moving. If he was ever in the system, we'd have him already. So we go another way. Relatives, hospital records, old medical samples, or... Her voice goes quieter. We go to the family. The decision is ugly but simple. If they want to prove the blood in Emily's car belongs to a man who can no longer speak, they'll need the people who loved him to help them do it. They locate the younger brother, the one whose DNA sparked the familial match. Lives in a quiet neighborhood in a different county, mid-level office job. No serious record since that one nonviolent charge that put him in the database. Married, 2 kids, a yard with a swing set. Lara and another detective drive out there in an unmarked car, the highway stretching ahead in a blunt gray line. The sky is clear but flat, a pale blue that offers no opinions. On the way, they stop talking about the case and start talking about anything else. Traffic, a new coffee place near the station, the game last night. It's a ritual, a buffer. Once they knock on that door, whatever they say will be remembered. The house is modest, neatly kept, a porch light that probably comes on at the same time every evening, a pair of small shoes by the front door, wind chimes that tinkle when they step onto the porch, a soft sound that feels wildly out of place with what they're about to do. The man who opens the door looks like the DMV photo in the file, just older. The same jaw, the same eyes, the same nose that, if you look carefully, is echoed in the picture of his dead brother on the board back in Santa Aurelia. Mr. Keaton? Lara holds her badge out. I'm Detective Ortiz with the Santa Aurelia Sheriff's Office. This is Detective Mills. We'd like to talk to you if we could. He pulls the door a fraction closer to his body, instinctive. What about? An old case, she says, from 2003. You can see the math happen behind his eyes. 2003. Santa Aurelia. Old case. The silence that follows feels like someone has siphoned all the air off the porch. My kids are inside, he says slowly. Is this about me? Not directly. Lara's voice is careful, precise. We're looking into something that may involve a family member. We'd like to ask you a few questions if that's all right. We can go somewhere private. They sit at the kitchen table. His wife hovers, uncertain, then retreats to the living room with the children, the murmur of a cartoon floating through the wall like distant static. On the table, a bowl of fruit, a school newsletter, a set of car keys with a plastic grocery store loyalty card bent at the edges. Life, imprinted in objects. Lara switches on her recorder. The red light glows small but bright. We're revisiting a case involving a young woman who disappeared in Santa Aurelia in 2003, she says. Her name was Emily Hart. Recognition flickers. Not immediate, but there. I remember the posters. I was in my early 20s then. It was all over town for a while. He swallows. You think my brother had something to do with that? She doesn't answer right away. She lays out the facts instead. The familial DNA match, the mother's maiden name, the apartment near the campus, the route, the cafe, the nickname. With every detail, his shoulders sag a little more. His hands, resting on the table, start to tremble. Daniel. He stops, presses his fingers to his eyes. He used to go to that coffee shop, I remember. He'd talk about the girl who always gets my order right. He said she was sharp, quick. I never thought. He was my big brother. He read books. He paid his taxes. He helped me move. We're not asking you to decide what he did or didn't do, Lara says softly. We're asking for your help in finding out. They ask about 2003, about late nights, about any hint, any crack in the facade that might have been ignored because families want to believe the best version of their own, a temper maybe, a sudden move. Strange scratches on a car, a week where he seemed off. Memories ooze out, reluctant and uneven. There was a night Daniel showed up at his brother's place late, clothes rumpled, quieter than usual. There was a sudden decision to move out of Santa Aurelia a few months after the disappearance, framed as time for a change. There were conversations cut short when the news came on. None of it is proof. All of it is suggestion. We're going to need a DNA sample, Lara says at last, from you. It'll help us narrow things down, confirm the relationship we're seeing in the database. And if we can locate any old medical samples from Daniel, we'll need permission from next of kin to access those too. He stares at her, eyes reddening. You want me to help you prove my brother might have been... that he can't finish the sentence. I want to help a family that has been waiting 19 years, she answers. I want to tell them something more than we don't know. Silence. The cartoon laughs through the wall. One of the kids calls out, "Dad," in a voice too bright for this room. He nods, just once, like a man stepping off a ledge. Do it, he whispers. If he did something, if he hurt someone. He looks up, eyes burning. I need to know who I grew up with. The swab takes seconds. A small thing, a quick brush inside the cheek, a tube sealed with a click. It feels too easy for something that might shatter all the stories this family tells itself about who they are. On the drive back, the unmarked car feels heavier. Neither detective speaks much. Every now and then, Lara glances at the evidence bag on the seat between them, the tiny plastic tube glowing faintly in the afternoon light. Back at the lab, more machines, more cycles, more lines on a screen. The result, when it drops, is like a trapdoor opening. Strong familial match, the report says. The unknown male from Emily's car is very likely a close blood relative of the man they just swabbed. Probability off the charts. And when they piece in the family tree, the timelines, the location, the age, the only branch that fits is the one with a name they can't question anymore. Daniel Keaton. Lara stands alone in the cold case room when she reads it. The fluorescent lights hum overhead. The clock ticks. Somewhere downstairs a phone rings. Here, the noise stops at the threshold. She approaches the board and pins the new report beneath Keaton's photo. The red string between unknown male DNA and his face is no longer speculation. It's almost certainty. Almost. There's no confession, no recovered weapon, no body, no direct witness who saw him on the highway with Emily that night. But 19 years ago, in a car left by the side of the road, he bled where he shouldn't have. Outside the station, clouds are rolling in. Wind whips up small spirals of dust in the lot. The ocean, a mile away, works itself into a slow, heavy anger against the rocks. The press gets wind of a major break. They don't have names. They don't have details. But they have enough for a headline. California 2003 cold case nears answers. New DNA links. Emily Hart disappearance to local man. The story travels fast. It always does. News trucks roll back into Santa Aurelia. Tires familiar with the route now. Cameras set up in front of the station again, just like they did in 2003. Microphones appear. A reporter stands framed against the building, hair tamed for the wind, voice polished to deliver shock and closure in under 90 seconds. After nearly 2 decades, the disappearance of 21-year-old college student Emily Hart may finally be solved. Inside, in a small office, Emily's parents sit side by side, hands locked together so tightly their knuckles have gone bloodless. They are older now, faces lined not just by time, but by waiting. They have come here for every anniversarial meeting, every "we're still looking," every "we have nothing new to share, but we haven't forgotten." Today is different. Lara sits across from them, a file in front of her. She doesn't look at the cameras outside. She doesn't think about the word solved being tossed around as if it's simple. She thinks about the girl in the JPEG and the highway and the jacket and the blood. We've identified a likely suspect, she says. Her voice is clear, but she cannot make it gentle enough to avoid the impact. A man who lived in town when Emily disappeared. We've matched DNA from your daughter's car to a member of his family, and our investigation shows a strong likelihood that he was the one in contact with her that night. Emily's mother stares at her, eyes wide, breath shallow. Her father's jaw works as if trying to chew through the moment. What's his name? He asks. She tells them. She explains the link, the coffee shop, the habits, the move, the death. The death hits them like a second blow. He's gone? The mother whispers. He died, and we never... There may still be a way to bring the full truth to light, Lara says. We can reconstruct his movements. We can talk to people who knew him. We can search old addresses, old storage units, old property he may have had. We may find physical evidence that connects him definitively to what happened. We may find where he took her, what he did. But you can't put him in handcuffs, the father says. You can't put him in a courtroom. No, she admits. We can't. The room fills with the sound of grief that doesn't know where to land. 19 years of imagining this moment, and now the monster has a name but no face to confront, no eyes to look into and ask, why? Outside, the headline writes itself. Cold case solved. Inside, it feels anything but. They call it closure. The word looks sharp on the news ticker, sounds neat in a reporter's script, but inside the sheriff's office it feels wrong, like a shirt that doesn't fit. Closure means something is over. What they have now is something waking up. The morning after Keaton's name leaks, Santa Aurelia hums like a beehive that's been kicked. Joggers slow when they see the satellite truck outside the station. At the bakery, someone reads the headline off their phone. Local man linked to 2003 disappearance of student Emily Hart. Conversations drop. The clink of cups becomes background to a rising murmur. Didn't he live over by the college? I swear I remember him, always with a book. Imagine eating next to a killer and never knowing. At the campus, an older professor stares at the same headline, the glow of the screen reflected in his glasses. He remembers a girl in the third row with a star necklace and a quick mind, remembers assuming her future would be something bright and long. He never imagined this would be the way her name comes back. California 2003 cold case solved. The scrolling bar insists at the bottom of a cable news screen. Solved. The word is too easy. In the cold case room, Laura reaches for the remote and mutes it. The image flickers on silently while she stares at the board. Out there, they need a clean story. In here, she needs the messy version. She starts with the places he touched. Keaton's old apartment building has been painted a cheerful yellow and renamed with something that sounds like a condo development, but the hallway is still narrow. The windows still look onto the same tired alley. Inside Unit 3B, a young couple hover while crime scene techs roll back rugs and move furniture. We've lived here 3 years, the woman says, twisting her hands. We didn't know. It's not about you, Laura answers. We're just interested in anything that might have stayed with the place. Blue light sweeps the walls. Chemicals hiss from spray bottles, faint fluorescence ghosting across corners and baseboards. They swab old stains in the subfloor, pull dust from vents, photograph the closet. Mostly, they collect the residue of the current tenants' lives, crumbs, lost earrings, a toy dinosaur jammed under the step. Time covers tracks. That's what it does best. But Keaton left more than an apartment behind. Property records show a rental unit at a storage facility just off the highway, paid automatically for years. Never closed, never cleaned out. The address makes everyone go quiet when it appears on the screen. Half a mile from mile 14. The storage place is a strip of metal doors in faded blue, backed up against a chain-link fence and a strip of brown grass. A manager in a logo polo leads them down the row, keyring jangling. Unit's been paid on time the whole way through, he says. Same name. Nobody ever calls about it. We just let it be. He stops at 27. The lock is old, dust etched into its grooves. The metal door shivers as the bolt cutters snap through. When they haul it up, a breath of stale, dry air spills out, smelling of cardboard and old fabric. Flashlights click on. Inside, the usual aftermath of a life in transit. A cheap dresser, drawers skewed, plastic tub stacked too high. A bicycle with a flat, its chain frozen in rust. Boxes and sagging cardboard, labels scrawled in marker. Books, kitchen, misc, misc. The word that means things you didn't want to think about too hard. Document everything, Lara says. Cameras flare, gloves snap, texts begin the slow excavation. Books, of course. Heavy hardcovers with worn corners, a cafe punch card tucked into one as a bookmark. Old plates, a box of mismatched cutlery, a coat that still smells faintly of some long-discontinued laundry detergent. Then, at the bottom of a drawer in the dresser, under folded sweaters gone stiff with time, a plain cardboard shoebox. No label, tape yellowed at the edges. The room tightens around it. The photographer moves in, lens hovering. A tech draws a knife down the tape. The lid lifts. Inside sit smaller bags, zip-top. Cloudy plastic gone slightly opaque with age. Each holds something small. The first bag, a silver necklace with a tiny star. The second, a stretched hair tie, a few brown hairs still snared in the elastic. The third, an old receipt from a cafe. Logo half faded, but the name written at the top still visible in block letters. Emily. For a second, no one moves. Even breathing seems loud. Lara feels the air leave her lungs. She forces it back in, looks again to be sure she's not seeing what she wants to see. There's more. A concert ticket stub from a venue 2 towns over. A bus pass stamped with a route number. A student ID for another young woman. Different name, different school, different year. Her face smiling up from beneath a smear of time. Trophies. A private museum. Bag them, Lara says, voice low. Individually. All of it. Back at the station, the discovery hits like a shockwave. The necklace is rushed to the lab. The hair is tested. The student ID gets its data run through missing persons databases. Old photos of Emily are pulled from the archive and scanned. One image taken at a birthday dinner months before she vanished shows her turning toward a camera, laughing, the same little star catching the light at her throat. No one has to say it aloud. The match is obvious. On the whiteboard beneath Emily Hart, someone writes, "Necklace recovered, Keaton unit." For the Hart family, the call comes in the middle of an afternoon that had been, up until that moment, ordinary. A sink full of dishes, a TV on in the background, the dog asleep in a patch of light on the floor. "We've located items in a storage unit linked to Keaton," Lara tells them in the small office at the station. "We believe one is Emily's necklace." Emily's mother grips the edge of the chair, eyes fixed on a photograph of the star on the table. "I gave her that when she finished her first year," she says, voice thin. "She said it was lucky. I used to imagine if someone found it, they'd mail it back. In a little envelope. No note, just the necklace." She shudders. "I never pictured this." Outside, cameras arrive faster than grief can settle. Killer's trophy box found, a banner screams online. Cold case suspect hoarded victim's belongings, community in shock. Old co-workers of Emily meet at a bar that didn't exist in 2003, the glow of flat screens washing their faces in incident light. "She always fiddled with that necklace on shift," one says, staring into his drink. "Said it kept her focused. I can't believe he had it all this time." Another presses her palm to her forehead. "We should have pushed harder about that guy, the one with the books. We all joked he was creepy. We never wrote his name down. We just never did." Guilt slides between their words like a shadow. Online, armchair detectives flood comment sections with theories. Screenshots of maps, grainy Google Earth images of Mile 14. Someone finds an old thread on a forgotten forum where a server once described a weird regular who reads until close. People circle the post like vultures around an old bone. In the cold case room, the noise outside is reduced to a dull pressure. Lara keeps the TV off. The only glow she wants is from the board and the laptop screens. The lab results come in. The necklace carries skin cells consistent with Emily. The hair from the tie is a mitochondrial match to hers as well. The student ID belongs to a woman reported missing in another county in 2001. Her case, also unsolved, is suddenly pulled from whatever shelf it was left on and dragged under the same burning light. Keaton's box wasn't dedicated to one story. It was a collection of endings. Detectives from that other county arrive, files in hand, eyes hard, jaws set. They stand with Lara over the board, mapping dates and places. He was already doing this, someone thinks, long before Emily. How many roads did he haunt? How many nights did he wait in cars no one remembers? They expand their search around the storage facility, around Mile 14, around every place his bank records say he bought gas or groceries. Cadaver dogs work the hills again, noses low, tails stiff, handlers calling out encouragement into dry wind. They find bones, but they belong to animals. Deer, dogs, nothing that answers 19 years of questions. "This should be good news," Emily's mother says, standing over a spread of search maps in Lara's office. "They keep telling me it's good they didn't find her, but it just means there's one more place she isn't." The Hart case has proof now. DNA, trophies, a suspect. The DA begins to sketch out what an official statement would look like, how to phrase a conclusion when the accused can't sit in a courtroom. Phrases like probable, strongly indicated, reasonable certainty appear in drafts. On television, that gets boiled down to one word: solved. For Lara, the word tastes like ash. At night, when the building has emptied and the hum of printers has died, she sits in the dim of the cold case room and looks at the board. Emily's photo, Keaton's, the storage unit, the map of the highway, the necklace, the student ID from 2001, the line of red string that links one county to another, one girl to another, one night to another. She traces the path in her mind. Keaton in the cafe, watching. Keaton in the car, following. The stop on the shoulder. The struggle. There must have been one. That smear of blood on the steering wheel says so. The drive away. And then nothing. "What did you do?" she asks the photo softly. "Where did you go?" Silence answers. The dead can incriminate, but they can't explain. Santa Aurelia doesn't sleep so easily now. Parents who used to tell their kids, "That was a long time ago. They never even knew who did it," have a new version. They found him, but he's gone, so they can't put him in prison. It doesn't sound any safer. On Maple Street, the Hart house glows late, a square of light in the dark. Inside there's a box on the table, not cardboard, evidence bags, the things the law can give back once it's done with them. The necklace lies among them, sealed, tagged. Emily's mother can't bring herself to open it yet. The idea of touching something that was pressed against her daughter's skin and then kept in a killer's private stash for 19 years is almost unbearable. The idea of never touching it again is worse. This doesn't feel like an ending, her father says quietly, standing beside her. That's because it isn't, she answers. He's right. She's right. The cold case has heat, names, objects, lines on a board, new headlines. It has a man to blame and a town to point at and say, he lived here. It has, in the eyes of the outside world, a resolution. But when Lara locks the cold case room for the night, when she walks past the darkened windows and hears the distant rush of the ocean, she knows the truth that never makes it into the broadcast. A box can tell you who. DNA can tell you how close. Files can tell you where someone once was. None of it, not yet, has told them where Emily is now. The story should be cooling down by now. That's what usually happens. Name the suspect, show the evidence, point at the box of trophies, run the montage of the smiling victim's photo fading into the grainy DMV shot of the man who took everything away, and then let the news cycle move on. Except this one doesn't move. It lingers. California 2003 cold case solved, the national anchor says, voice smooth, practiced. Authorities say they've identified the man responsible for the disappearance of college student Emily Hart. On screen, Keaton's photo appears next to Emily's. One face blank, one bright, underneath a banner, answers after 19 years. In living rooms across the state, people nod, satisfied. Justice, they tell themselves, even if it's late, even if there are no handcuffs. They flip the channel, content to let the story become something they heard about once. But in Santa Aurelia, people don't flip away. At the grocery store, the cashier recognizes the suspect's last name from someone she went to school with. At the hardware store, an old colleague of Keaton's stares at a display of nails, replaying half-forgotten breaks where they talked about nothing and he laughed at something mundane, never once raising any sort of alarm. At the park, mothers pull their children a little closer when they pass men walking dogs alone. You'd think naming the monster would make him smaller. Instead, he seems to spread. Back in the town's quieter corners, the news lands differently. In a small apartment above a row of shops, a woman in her 40s watches the report with the sound off. On her coffee table, an old flyer curls at the edges, the ink faded. Missing, 2001. Another face, another name, another set of eyes that never came home. The student ID from the storage unit belongs to her sister. For 19 years, their family carried their own unsolved story, alone, off camera. Now their pain is a footnote under someone else's headline. Her phone buzzes. A detective from another county tells her what Santa Aurelia already knows. Keaton's box connected them, her sister Emily, maybe others. We think he's responsible, the detective says. We think we can finally say that. Think, she repeats, the words sour in her mouth. But you don't know where she is. There's a pause on the other end. Not yet. Then nothing is solved, she says. In a different house, miles away, Keaton's younger brother lies awake in the dark, the bedroom ceiling a pale blur. The news has turned his last name into a warning. His kids came home asking questions they heard in whispers at school. Are we related to a killer? Did Uncle Daniel really? He answered what he could. He left out what he didn't know, which is everything that matters. On the nightstand, there's a photo frame turned face down. It's from a Christmas 15 years ago. Him, his wife, their first newborn, and Daniel, holding the baby like he was trying to get it right, smiling in that tight little way he always did. Now the frame points its glass to the table. In the cold case room, though, the story keeps opening instead of closing. The box from the storage unit turns out to be less a trophy chest and more a catalog of ghosts. Some items tie cleanly to known victims, others don't. One hair sample from a different bag, wrapped around the clasp of a bracelet, comes back as female, but not Emily, not the 2001 victim. Unknown. Another student ID, edges cracked, belongs to a woman who, according to records, is alive and living in another state. She was never reported missing at all. You ever remember being in a storage unit? Lara asks her over the phone later. A half joke that doesn't land. The woman laughs nervously. I used to go to that cafe, yeah. Guy in glasses always read in the corner. I think he asked to borrow my pen once. How did my ID end up there? No one knows. Maybe it dropped. Maybe he bumped into her, pocketed it, kept it because he liked the feeling of having a piece of someone's life without them knowing. Maybe she slipped through his hands the way others didn't. The box tells them he was watching more people than he ever touched. It widens the circle of fear without answering the core question. The original detective on the Hart case, Detective Hennessy, retired, sits in his living room with the sound turned low on the same news feed, his face lit by the TV's cold glow. He watches his own name scroll by in a chyron, quoting an old statement he doesn't even remember giving. He hears the anchor say, investigators did all they could at the time, and winces. He remembers the highway, the car, the smear on the steering wheel. He remembers the Hart House, the missing posters, the calls that went nowhere. He also remembers something else, a detail small enough that it never made it onto a whiteboard, a note in the margin of an interview he meant to follow up on and never did. The next morning, he walks into the station for the first time in years. The lobby smells the same. Coffee, paper, something metallic and permanent. The deputy at the front desk does a double take, then grins. "Detective H," he says, "didn't think we'd see you back here except for the retirement cake." Hennessy lifts a hand in a half salute. Still not sure that cake wasn't store-bought and passed off as homemade. He signs in, gets a guest badge, makes his way upstairs. The hallway to the cold case room feels shorter than it used to. The board, when he sees it, feels bigger. The girl's face he remembers is still in the center. The man's face he never knew is now beside her. "You picked a hell of a time to visit," Lara says, stepping away from the board. "You picked a hell of a case to solve," he replies. The word sounds fragile in his mouth. "Except you didn't call me, so I figured I'd invite myself." They sit. He studies the arrangement of photos, reports, maps. She studies him as if he's part of the evidence now, a living archive. "You did good work with what you had," she says. She means it. He flicks his eyes from Keaton's photo to the storage unit pictures. What we had was barely anything and a clock running out. Tech was different. Resources were different. Nobody was talking about reviews and task forces. Once a case went cold, it went cold. "But you're here," she says, "so something's still warm." He exhales, long and slow. "There was a call," he says. "Back then, a couple weeks after she vanished. We logged a lot of noise, cranks, people who wanted their 15 minutes. This one, I wrote it off, and it's been sitting in my head like a stone ever since I saw that headline last night." He asks for the old call log, points to a date with a finger that still remembers the weight of a pen. There it is. Anonymous tip, male caller, payphone tracings, inconclusive. "Guy said he saw 2 cars pulled over near mile 14, Hennessy recounts. Blue Honda and a sedan. Thought it was a breakdown situation at first. Then he claims he saw the sedan pull out fast, lights off, heading down one of the service roads that cut inland. When we tried to follow up on that, the road description was vague, and the call bounced off an old payphone near a bar that was closing down. We already had half the town seeing things by then. I let it go." "And you think that matters now?" He looks at the map on the board, finger drifting along the thick line of the coastal highway, then tapping the thinner dotted lines that spider inland. Maintenance roads, fire breaks, forgotten turnoffs. "I think you've been staring at this as a straight line," he says. "Work, cafe, highway, mile 14, fade to black. What if it wasn't that neat?" The idea that there might have been another car is not new. They considered it, rejected it, let it slide. But hearing it now, paired with a direction, down inland away from the lit main road, it feels sharper. "To stash a body, you don't linger on the shoulder," Hennessy says. "You get off the stage." He regrets the phrasing as soon as it leaves his mouth, but the analogy works. The main highway is the stage, visible, exposed. The service roads are backstage, quiet, dark, sounds swallowed by dirt and scrub. Lara pulls up an overlay of 2003 utility maps, service roads for power line maintenance, old fire routes. Some are gated now, some have been paved over, some end at nowhere. "What if he didn't have all night?" she asks. "What if something spooked him? Another car, a patrol, a call, enough that he moved fast, took the first turn that looked empty and close." They narrow it down to 3 possible roads branching off within a small radius of mile 14 that existed then and still exist now. New search plan, new grid, new lines on the board. If Keaton was methodical enough to keep trophies, he was methodical enough to choose someplace he thought wouldn't be disturbed. But panic breaks patterns. Even planners make mistakes when the clock speeds up. The next morning before dawn, the search teams assemble again. Trucks idling in the lot, breath blooming white in the cold air, flashlights cutting through darkness. This time, they're not looping the same old trails. They're going inland, deeper, following the routes the satellite maps show as pale scars in the hills. At the edge of one such road, a rusty gate leans at a broken angle. A faded sign warns, "Authorized personnel only." Beyond it, the dirt track snakes out of sight, flanked by dry brush and tired trees. "This used to be for utility access," a county worker explains, standing beside Lara, coffee in hand. "They stopped using it regularly years ago. Too narrow for the bigger trucks. We only come up here if something's really wrong with the lines." "How often is that?" He shrugs. "Almost never." Almost never. 2 words killers love. The teams move in on foot, boots crunching on loose rock. Cadaver dogs work ahead, noses pulling them along invisible currents of scent. The light grows slowly, turning the hills from vague shapes into hard, overlapping lines. There's no cinematic moment, no bone lying clean on the surface, no ring glinting in a shaft of light. There is only the repetition of steps, the drag of brush against pants, the low murmur of handlers coaxing their dogs. In the cold case room, a red marker traces their route on the map, inch by inch. In the Hart house, a television sits silent in the living room while Emily's parents stand by the window instead, watching the sky brighten over the town, wondering if this is the morning something finally gives. Back in the station, additional lab results from the storage unit drop into Lara's inbox. Prints. Faint, partial, smeared by age. Most of them are Keaton's, as expected. A few belong to warehouse workers from the storage facility who have handled the boxes over the years. But on the plastic of one bag holding the 2001 victim's concert ticket, there is the ghost of another ridge pattern. Not enough for a full identification, enough to tell them it doesn't match Keaton at all. She reads that line twice. Not his. Possibilities explode. A clerk, a friend, a sibling, someone else who touched it before he stored it, or something worse. An accomplice. The timeline she has built in her head stutters. For months, they've been shaping this into a story of one careful predator working alone, haunting a town, leaving no witnesses. The idea that someone else might have been close enough to share or handle his trophies, close enough to leave their touch on something he took from a victim, rips the clean edge off the narrative. She pulls the file on Daniel's past associates, co-workers, roommates, anyone who ever shared an address. The list grows. Names with no special light on them suddenly feel heavy. It might be nothing, a smudge from a previous life, an innocent hand. It might be a second shadow walking just outside the circle of their flashlights. Down on the service road, a dog suddenly stops, head snapping to the right. The handler straightens, tension running up the leash. The animal's body language changes, alert, intent, tail rigid. Got something, the handler calls, voice carrying over the scrub. They fan out toward a small dip in the land, a hollow choked with brush and fallen branches, the kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for a reason to hide something. The soil there looks a little different, slightly sunken, disturbed long ago and then taken back by time. Shovels come off shoulders, gloves tighten. The first scoop of dirt is just dirt, the second too. But as they peel back layers, the smell changes, shifting from dry earth to something deeper, sourer, the kind that sits in the air even years after the worst of it is gone. Nobody says this is it. Nobody says anything at all. They just keep digging. They hit bone on the 11th shovel. At first, it doesn't register, just a different sound, a duller thunk instead of the soft scrape of metal through dirt. The deputy pauses, eyes narrowing, then kneels and starts to brush the soil away with his gloved hands. The dog's breathing is loud behind him, panting with a strange kind of urgency, muscles still electric. Slow down, the handler says. Easy. The deputy shifts from digging to uncovering, fingers moving more delicately now, sweeping aside dust that hasn't seen light in almost 2 decades. A pale curve emerges, then another, then the clear shape of a human radius, thin and stained by the earth. Stop, Lara calls. Nobody move. The hillside holds its breath. Cameras come up, evidence flags snap open, the team around the pit forms a rough circle, boots anchored, attention drilled into that small opening in the ground where the past is pushing its way back to the surface. From above, the scene looks almost religious. Figures bowed around a grave they didn't dig, reaching in to pull out what someone else thought they had buried forever. They widen the excavation in careful rings, not shovels now, but trowels, brushes, gloved fingertips tracing edges. Piece by piece, the outline appears. A skull turned slightly to the side, a spine curled, knees pulled inward. The position speaks its own language. This isn't a coffin burial. This is a body dropped into a hastily cut hole, folded by gravity and time. The clothing is mostly gone, rotted into colorless threads, but a few stubborn pieces cling on, metal bits, a zipper pull, the faint suggestion of denim. Around one skeletal ankle, impossibly fragile, there is a ring of plastic collapsed in on itself, brittle and yellowed. A zip tie. Get that photographed, Lara says quietly, in situ. Under the left hand, pressed beneath the metacarpals like something the body tried to hold even after the flesh was gone, lies a small, chalky object. A tooth, not from the skeleton. Too small, too clean, unnaturally placed. What is that? A tech leans in, camera shutter clicking. Baby tooth, he murmurs. Looks like one of the front ones, not hers. Too small, wrong shape, and no child skeleton in this grave. It could be nothing, a fragment that found its way here by accident, carried by water or animal or time. But the position, cupped under bone, as if placed, feels deliberate. A souvenir inside a trophy. When the last of the soil is cleared and the edges of the burial are fully defined, the site looks like a dark wound in the hillside. The forensic anthropologist, brought in for exactly this possibility, steps in with practiced reverence. She speaks in measurements, in angles, in aging patterns on bone. Female, young adult, long enough in the ground to match 19 years. No one says Emily's name out loud here, not yet. They bag each piece separately. Skull, vertebrae, ribs, long bones. Tiny fragments cradled like eggshells. The zip tie, the baby tooth. Every stone that seems out of place. They scrape the sides of the grave for trace, for fibers, for anything that clung to the walls before time dried them out. A small shard of duct tape comes up, adhesive, long dead, but still holding a ghost of a fingerprint pattern. Up on the service road, the trucks idle low, exhaust fuming in the cold air. The sun has climbed higher, but down in the hollow it still feels like early morning. The call to the station is short. We've got remains. In the cold case room, the map gets its first red X in years. On Maple Street, the Hart House phone rings. This time they don't ask them to come in, not yet. They tell them they found what appears to be a burial site near the area where Emily's car was recovered, that the remains are believed to be a female of similar age, that there will have to be tests. The words are careful and clinical. On the other end of the line, they land like blows. Emily's mother doesn't cry right away. She sits down very slowly at the kitchen table, phone still pressed to her ear even after the call ends, and stares at the wood grain as if it's suddenly unfamiliar. Her husband's hand hovers at her shoulder, not quite touching. "So this is it," he says, voice hoarse. This is the part where they tell us she's never coming home." She shakes her head, a small jerky motion. "They told us that 19 years ago," she says. "They just didn't have the proof." In the lab, the work shifts gears. The skeleton is laid out on a stainless steel table under bright lights. Bones that once moved under Emily's skin, if it is her, are now anonymous pieces in a map of injury and silence. The anthropologist notes healed stress markers, old microfractures, the way certain ridges suggest someone who spent a lot of time on their feet. It fits a barista who carried trays and stood at a counter. But then she sees something else. Around the hyoid bone, tiny and delicate at the base of the neck, there is damage, a fracture. Not clean, not neat, but consistent with pressure from hands or ligatures, consistent with strangulation. The cause of death that never made it onto any certificates in 2003 finally has a shape. Bruises don't survive 19 years underground. But bones remember pressure. DNA samples are taken from the marrow that remains. From teeth pulled carefully, respectfully, as if still attached to nerves, names are coded into numbers, the numbers are fed into machines. The days between the dig and the results feel both stretched and compressed. Every conversation in town seems to bend inevitably back toward that hillside. People talk in the grocery aisles, at intersections, in the back pews of church. "Did you hear? They found a body. Near the highway, right? It has to be her. Who else would it be?" On the local news, a helicopter shot shows the search area from above. Tiny figures clustered around a scar in the earth, vehicles like toys along the road, no close-ups, no details, just enough to feed the imagination. Somewhere far from Santa Aurelia, in a different county, in a different living room, the woman whose sister vanished in 2001 watches that same footage and feels her stomach turn to stone. The storage unit connected their cases. The zip tie, the baby tooth, the possibility of more than one grave. It all loops in her head. "How many holes did he dig?" she whispers into an empty room. Back in the station, the unknown print from the duct tape shard waits its turn under the scanner. The lab tech knows better than to expect miracles from a partial like this. Aged and distorted. Still, he runs it. The system hums. No match. The machine returns a negative with clinical indifference. Whoever touched that tape, whether it was Keaton or someone else, is not in any database it can see. The baby tooth is examined. No root, fully formed crown, lost naturally most likely before it ever ended up in that grave. There's no living parent to ask, no child to line up, open their mouth, and see which gap matches. It may forever belong to no one they can name. But the forensic dentist can do one thing, compare. On a separate monitor, old dental records from Emily's file appear. X-rays taken at 16, at 18. The pattern of her teeth is as unique as a fingerprint. The skull on the table has jawbones that, when matched to those records, click into place with an eerie, inevitable fit. Emily Hart is officially no longer missing. She is deceased. The word looks brutal on the report. It's worse when it's spoken aloud. Laura reads it twice before she walks down the hallway to that small office where Emily's parents have been summoned more times than anyone should be. The room hasn't changed much in 19 years. Different chairs, same size, different paint, same weight in the air. They sit opposite her again, hands twined so tight their knuckles are white. "We've completed the analysis," Laura says. No preamble, no softening that would insult them. "The remains we recovered from the site off the service road match Emily's dental records. DNA confirmed it as well." Emily's father looks down, his breath leaving him in a shudder. Emily's mother closes her eyes very slowly, as if bracing for impact. "So she was there," she says, "all this time, while we drove past, while we put up lights, while people took their dogs for walks and went on hikes, and she was right there." "I'm sorry," Laura says, two words that feel useless. "We also found indications consistent with strangulation and evidence that zip ties may have been used at some point." The mother's eyes flash open. "Was she alone?" she asks. "At the end, I mean, was it just him?" "I don't know," Laura says honestly. "We found a partial fingerprint on tape at the burial that doesn't match Keaton. It could be a contamination, an old print from someone else entirely, or it could not be. We're still working on that." Emily's father presses his palm hard against his forehead. "So the man who killed her is dead, and someone else might have been there with him, and that someone is still out there." "We don't have proof of an accomplice yet," Laura says carefully, "but we can't rule it out." There's no good way to tell parents that the simplest version of the monster, one man, one grave, one clean line of blame, might be a lie. When they leave the station, the cameras are waiting. A reporter calls out, "Do you feel you have closure now?" as if it's a reasonable question. Emily's mother stops, just for a second, looks straight into the lens. "No," she says, "I feel like I finally know where my daughter is, and I feel like someone else knows more than they're saying." The clip goes viral. "No closure. Mother of cold case victim speaks out," the headlines say. "Hart family demands full truth." Inside the cold case room, the red X on the map is no longer just a search zone. It's a grave recovered, a place where someone's last minutes sank into dirt, where a careful man made at least one rushed decision. They go back to the service road with new eyes. If Keaton dug one hole, he might have dug another. The dogs sweep wider, the teams push further. Every dip in the land, every cluster of brush, every unnatural rise is treated like a potential crime scene. They don't find another grave, not yet. Instead, they find fragments of a life lived beside this ugliness. A crushed beer can half buried under gravel. Tire tracks long since baked into hardpan. A spent cigarette filter wedged in a crack between stones. Routine trash, probably. People come up here to drink, to talk, to be alone with their secrets. Not every trace is a clue, but now everything feels like one. Back at the board, the story shifts again. For years, the line ended at a question mark. Now it ends at a grave. For the public, this is the moment when the script writes itself. Emily Hart disappeared. A suspect was identified. Her remains were found. Cold case solved. But the details won't cooperate with the headline. There's the box of trophies from women who never crossed paths in any obvious way. There's the unknown fingerprint on the tape. There's the baby tooth hidden in the grave like a secret only the killer understood. There's the second family from 2001, now fused to Emily's story whether they like it or not. Hennessy stands in the doorway one evening looking at the updated board, hat in his hands. "I used to think if we found her, that would be it," he says quietly. "I'd stop seeing that car whenever I closed my eyes. I'd stop pulling over every time I saw a Honda on the side of a road. Thought my brain would finally file it under finished." "And now?" Lara asks. He shakes his head. "Now it feels like we cut open a wall to fix a leak and found something rotten all the way through." The calendar on the wall shows the days ticking past since the storage unit, since the DNA hit, since the grave. In the Hart house, a new date is quietly circled. The day their daughter was officially declared dead. Not the day she vanished. Not the day her car was found. The day 19 years of hope were converted by paper and lab results into fact. They place her necklace on the mantel at last, out of its evidence bag, cleaned, the chain repaired. It catches the light from the window the same way it did in old photos. Sometimes, when the house is quiet, her mother swears she can see the shadow of her daughter's hand reach up, out of habit, to touch it. In the news, the story settles into a familiar arc. Relentless mother finally vindicated, dogged detectives refusing to give up, science stepping in where memory and luck failed. It's an easy narrative to sell. What doesn't fit in the 2-minute package, what doesn't fit in the headline California 2003 cold case solved, is the echo that remains once the cameras cut away. The echo of a partial print with no name. The echo of another family staring at a 21-year-old flyer from 2001, wondering if there's a grave for them too, hidden on some forgotten road. The echo of a dead man's choices still unfolding in the lives of people who never met him. And underneath it all, the relentless, steady whisper that keeps Lara awake at night, staring at the board lit only by the low glow of a desk lamp. If someone else was there when he buried Emily Hart, then the case they thought they'd finally pinned down is not over at all. It's just shifted shape. The thing that won't stop bothering them isn't the grave. It isn't even the bones. It's the baby tooth. It sits in a small, clear vial on a tray in the lab, lighter than everything it's been asked to carry. Under the glass, it looks harmless, like something a parent might tuck into a jewelry box for no reason they can explain. But it was under the bones of a murdered girl, in a hole cut into a hill off a forgotten service road, buried there by someone who knew exactly what he'd done. Everyone has theories. Trophy from another victim, random fragment carried by water, a sick joke only the killer understood. Lara doesn't like theories. She likes results. "Run it," she tells the lab. "Full DNA. Compare it to everything we've got." The tech lifts an eyebrow. "You think it's going to talk?" "It's in the grave," she says. "It's already talking. I just want to know what it's saying." Dental pulp is stubborn. It hangs on. They slice the tooth carefully, extract what they can, feed it into machines that whir and hum and turn hard white enamel into quiet strings of data. When the report lands in her inbox, the subject line is dry. Tooth sample. Genetic relationship analysis. The first sentence hits like a punch. Tooth DNA shows strong familial relation to Keaton family line, most likely donor, direct descendant of Keaton's sibling. She reads it again, slower, direct descendant, sibling, not another victim, not a stranger, family. Lara closes her eyes for a heartbeat, the fluorescent hum of the lab thick in her ears. Then she stands, prints the report, and heads for the one house she hoped she wouldn't have to visit again so soon. Keaton's younger brother opens the door with the fatigue of someone who hasn't slept since the day detectives showed up on his porch. There are dark circles under his eyes. Behind him, the house buzzes with the small, busy noises of children, cartoons, sibling arguments, the thump of something dropped on a hardwood floor. His gaze flicks from her badge to the folder under her arm. "Another update?" he asks, voice flat. "In a way," she says. "Can we talk inside?" In the kitchen, the same bowl of fruit from their last visit sits on the table, slightly different arrangements of bruises and ripeness. A drawing is taped to the fridge, a stick figure family under a lopsided sun, all smiling. One of the little figures is labeled "Me" in crooked marker. Lara sets the folder down but doesn't open it yet. "We analyzed the baby tooth we found in the grave," she says. No preamble, no easing into it. There's no gentle way to deliver what comes next. He frowns, confused. "Okay, so it belonged to who?" "It's a familial match," she says. "Genetically close to you, to your family. The profile suggests it likely came from a child of yours." For a moment his face is blank, as if the words hit and slid off without sticking. Then the meaning lands. His hand shoots out, gripping the edge of the table so hard the bowl rattles. "No," he says. "No, that doesn't make sense. How?" "Do you remember your kids losing their first teeth?" Lara asks. "Did you keep any of them? Throw them away? Tooth fairy rituals? Anything like that?" He stares past her, eyes fixed on some point years back. "We did the, under the pillow thing," he says slowly. "My wife would swap it for $1. Sometimes the tooth would end up on her nightstand for a while. Once, I think, my brother was over and the kids were showing off. 'Look, Uncle Daniel, I lost a tooth.' He joked about how he never got that much money from the tooth fairy. He might have picked one up. I didn't think about it." His voice cracks. "Why would that matter? Why are you asking me this?" Lara opens the folder and slides the report across the table. The words are clinical, all percentages and probabilities, but the conclusion might as well be written in blood. "We believe your brother took one of your children's baby teeth," she says quietly. "And later, when he buried Emily Hart, he put it in the grave with her." The color drains from his face. For a second, she thinks he might be sick. He slumps back in his chair, breathing shallowly, one hand pressed against his chest as if something inside is physically tearing. "My kid," he whispers. "My kid was in that ground with her. Because of him." Lara doesn't respond. There is nothing she can say that will make that sentence less monstrous. He laughs then, a small, broken sound with no humor in it. "People keep asking me if I had any idea," he says, "if I ever saw anything off, and I keep thinking about stupid moments. Times he babysat, times he read them bedtime stories, times we left him alone in this house." His eyes shine, fury rising through the shock. "I thought the worst thing I'd have to explain to them was that their uncle was a killer. Now I have to tell them he used their tooth like some kind of signature." "You don't have to tell them everything," Lara says. "Not now. Not yet. They're kids. They're old enough to Google," he snaps. "Old enough for their friends' parents to whisper. You think this won't get out? Killer buried victim with nephew's tooth? They're going to eat that up." He isn't wrong. By the time Lara drives back to the station, the leak has already happened somewhere along the chain. Someone in the lab, someone at the DA's office, someone who knows someone at a newsroom. It takes exactly 2 hours for the first push alert to light up phones. Twist in California, cold case. Suspect buried victim with family member's baby tooth, sources say. By evening, it's on every front page. A psychologist on a cable news segment leans forward in his chair, explaining to a nodding anchor that such behavior suggests complex ritualistic tendencies, that it might represent an attempt to fuse his two worlds, that it's symbolic ownership. Theories pour out faster than facts. In the Keaton Kids School hallway, whispers thicken. Tooth fairy jokes, too loud laughter, sidelong glances. Teachers step in, but they can't catch every hissed remark. In the Hart house, the television stays off. Emily's parents don't need pundits to tell them what a baby tooth in their daughter's grave might mean. They need to sleep. They can't. Lara finds the story playing silently on a break room TV at the station, the caption bar shouting in bright letters while a panel argues about evil. She grabs the remote and kills the screen. "We didn't confirm that detail," a lieutenant says from behind her. "Media's getting bolder." "They're getting bored," she replies. They had cold case solved in big letters. Now they want a second act. The second act is what her boss is worried about too, but for different reasons. In a meeting that afternoon, the sheriff, the DA, and a couple of suit and tie types from the state sit around a conference table, the air thick with coffee and pressure. We need to consider our messaging, the DA says, tapping a pen against a legal pad. The public believes this case is resolved. Naming Keaton, finding Emily's remains, that's closure in their eyes. If we start talking about accomplices and rituals and baby teeth, we risk blowing this wide open again. It is wide open, Lara says. We have an unidentified partial print at the burial, a piece of tape with a foreign touch, and an item from the grave tied directly to the suspect's living family. That doesn't sound closed to me. Is there any evidence anyone else was at that scene? One of the suits asks. Concrete evidence. Not what ifs. Not yet, she says. But we're not done. The sheriff gives her a look that's half warning, half pride. The community is on edge, he says. They survived 19 years of not knowing who took that girl. Then we finally tell them, and they start to breathe again. Now these leaks have them thinking there was some kind of cult. Everyone's freaking out. We need to dial it back. So we lie? Lara asks. We ignore an unknown print because it complicates the headline? No one answers. The DA finally sighs. We don't lie, he says. We choose what we emphasize. Officially, the primary perpetrator is deceased. Officially, we have no identified living suspects. If you find one, we'll pivot. Until then, we tread carefully. Understood? Understood. Stay inside the script. Keep California 2003 cold case solved clean for the cameras. Back in the cold case room, the script sits on the board in messy handwriting and pinned photographs that refuse to line up neatly. Lara stares at the section dedicated to the tape fragment from the grave. The print image is a ghostly swirl of ridges, incomplete, smeared. The lab's report under it is brutally simple. No match found. She knows the databases have limits. They only know the people they've met. Criminals, military, certain workers. The world is full of fingerprints that never touched ink or scanner glass, still. Noah, she calls. What about third-party services, private labs, improved enhancement software? We've got that shard image filed away like it's 2005. It's not. He spins his chair around, pushes his glasses up. There's a state contract with a newer lab in LA that does advanced ridge reconstruction. They're backed up, but I can push the heart case to the front if the brass signs off. Get the brass, she says. If that print belongs to a storage clerk or a tape manufacturer, I want to know. If it belongs to someone who's been at the edge of this thing the whole time, I want to know that more. The sample ships out that afternoon. Somewhere downstate, another machine, another set of eyes, another piece of software takes its turn trying to pull clarity out of smudge. Waiting has become a second job. To keep from just sitting in it, they go back again to Keaton's life. Not the version in articles and files, but the version that existed in rentals and pay stubs and phone bills. The version that had friends, if he had any. At the publishing warehouse where he worked in 2003, most of the staff has turned over. One woman, now a manager with flecks of gray in her hair, remembers him as a quiet guy who did his job and didn't make waves. He ever bring anyone around? Lara asks. Another guy, same age maybe. Someone you saw him with outside of work? She thinks, chewing her lip. There was one, she says finally. They'd have lunch together out back sometimes. Tall, kind of broad shoulders, always wore a ball cap pulled down. I assumed they were friends or brothers. I never got a name. We were busy. Could you describe him to a sketch artist? She laughs, bitter. It's been 19 years. All I remember is the hat. In an old HR file, they find a photocopy of a group photo from a long-ago company picnic. Keaton stands near the edge, bookish, sunglasses on. Next to him, half turned away, is a man in a faded baseball cap, head slightly down, face blurred where the copier smeared the ink. Just enough chin and jawline to hint at features, not enough to use. They log it anyway. Unknown male, warehouse associate. Under the photo, another question mark on a board full of them. Hennessy comes by again that evening, hat in hand. He stands in front of the board, looking at the baby tooth line, at the red string tying it back to the Keaton family, then following the thread out to the grave. I remember when we used to talk about bad guys like they were wolves, he says quietly. Separate from the flock, outside the fence. Easy to point at and say, over there. He shakes his head. Now it's uncles and coworkers and guys who show up in your family photo albums. The wolf was always inside the fence, Lara says. We just didn't want to see it. She thinks about the Hart family and the way Emily's mother looked into the camera and told the world there was no closure. About the 2001 family watching from another county, wondering if their sister's grave is out there too, one shallow shovel width away from being found or forever missed. About Keaton's brother, hands shaking on his kitchen table, realizing his child's tooth lay under the bones of a girl he never met. The case has answers now. Names, dates, locations, cause of death, enough to satisfy a line in a database, enough to justify the bold text on a breaking news banner. But every new answer seems to hatch another question. Who stood out back of the warehouse with Keaton and laughed over their lunch? Whose fingerprints, incomplete and smudged, pressed against tape used to bind or cover or conceal? How many other roads like that old service track snake into the hills, holding secrets no one has tripped over yet? Days later, when the advanced analysis of the print finally pings back to her inbox, Lara opens it with a breath she doesn't realize she's holding. The first line doesn't give her what she wants. Enhancement successful. Partial ridge detail improved. Identification still inconclusive. The second line is worse. Likely non-primary handler. Pattern consistent with brief contact or secondary transfer. The print is clearer now, sharper, but it still doesn't belong to anyone in any system. And the software thinks it might not even belong to the person who applied the tape. Just someone who touched it once before the roll ended up in the wrong hands. It could be an accomplice. It could be a store clerk who rang up the tape. It could be a coworker at the warehouse. The lab gives them probabilities, not certainties. The baby tooth gave them bloodlines. The grave gave them bones. The tape gives them doubt. And doubt, in a town that's just been told its nightmare is solved, is the one thing nobody wants to hear. The problem with a headline like California 2003 Cold Case Solved is that it leaves no room for what happens after. The cameras leave. The anchors move on. But the people inside the story are still there, standing in the wreckage, trying to figure out what to do with the pieces. For a few weeks, Santa Aurelia tries to pretend it can go back to normal. The search tape comes down from the service road. The news trucks finally pull out of the station lot. The cafe where Emily used to work runs a memorial drink special in her name, a sweet, sugary concoction with a star drawn in chocolate on the foam. Students post photos of it with hashtags and hearts, as if buying something for $4 can be an act of resurrection. At the Hart House, casseroles arrive at a rate that would be comedic if the occasion were anything else. Neighbors leave them at the door with notes, thinking of you, praying for peace. The fridge fills, the freezer fills, food piles up on counters. Emily's mother starts throwing them away, one by one, because the thought of eating comfort makes her feel like she's giving up on something unnamed. Her father moves differently now. Less like a man straining toward the future, more like someone who's been hit by a car he never saw coming. He stands often in front of the mantel, where the necklace hangs on a small stand, just watching it catch the light. "I used to think about walking her down an aisle," he says once, quietly, voice frayed. "Now I think about the weight of dirt on her chest. They have a funeral, if you can call it that, not a big public one, no cameras, just family and a few close friends who never stopped answering their calls, never stopped showing up on the anniversary of her disappearance with flowers, never stopped saying her name out loud when others started skipping around it. The coffin is small, lighter than anyone expects, carrying bones in a story that took 19 years to finish a single sentence. A pastor says words about rest, about heavenly justice, about peace. The Hart family hears none of it. What they hear is shovels. What they hear is the service road. What they hear is that line in the report, cause of death consistent with manual or ligature strangulation. After, when people line up to hug them to say she's in a better place, Emily's mother smiles a little too politely and thinks no. She was supposed to be here, in a different county, at a different kitchen table. Another family watches the footage of that quiet graveside service and feels something twist that doesn't quite have a name. Their girl is still technically missing. There is no grave for her, no necklace to hang, no closure, not even the painful kind. They see the words also linked to a 2001 disappearance flash for 3 seconds at the bottom of the screen before the segment cuts to commercial. Footnote. In the cold case room, the Hart file gets a new label. Homicide. Cleared by exception. Primary suspect deceased. It's a bureaucratic phrase, blunt and satisfying in a database. The number that once sat in the unsolved column slides into another category. On the board, though, nothing slides anywhere. The photos stay, the red strings stay, the baby tooth line stays as if someone drew a crack right through the middle of the board and left it there. "You know, most people would call this done," Noah says one night, stacking files. "You got the guy, you found her, you tied him to at least one more woman, you gave the family answers. That's more than a lot of cold cases ever get." Lara doesn't look away from the map. Most people didn't spend 6 months staring at that print in that tooth, she says. Most people didn't sit across from a mother who just buried her daughter and had to tell her there's a chance someone else was there and we don't know who. You really think he had help? She exhales. I think men like Keaton don't exist in a vacuum. Somebody heard something, saw something, benefited from him. Maybe it's not an accomplice in the classic sense. Maybe it's someone who looked away at the right time. Someone who helped him move a couch that wasn't just a couch. Someone who stood too close to the edge and got used to the view. The theory sits between them like a third person. While the detectives grind through files, Santa Aurelia does what small towns do with big horrors. It turns them into stories. Parents use Emily's name in warnings. Text me when you get there. Remember what happened to that Hart girl. Professors mention her case in criminology classes and sociology seminars. An example of how forensic science can finally break long dormant investigations, they say, trying not to look at the faces of the girls in the front row. A true crime podcast devotes a series to the case. They call it Highway to Nowhere, complete with moody music and a smoky-voiced host who leans too hard into the drama. They talk to retired Detective Hennessy, clipping his cautious sentences into sound bites. They talk to an old coworker of Keaton's who remembers him as quiet but kind of intense. They talk to a former classmate of Emily's who cries on air and then later wonders if she should have. They don't talk to the Hart family. By now, Emily's parents have learned to screen numbers they don't recognize. In episode 3, the host hints at the unknown print and the baby tooth like they're part of some elaborate ritual. Stranger than fiction, she says. Sinister family secret. A killer who wanted to fuse his own blood with his victim's grave. She doesn't mention that sometimes monsters are also brothers, uncles, men who held your baby once and joked about the tooth fairy while planning to pocket the evidence. That part doesn't fit as neatly into a podcast thumbnail. The attention brings tips, of course. It always does. A man calls from another state insisting he saw Keaton in a rest stop late one night and felt a bad vibe. A woman writes a long email about a guy she dated around that time who liked to drive with the lights off on back roads. Most of it is noise, but one message, buried in the flood, makes Lara stop scrolling. It's from a woman in her 50s who says she worked night cleaning crews in the early 2000s at various warehouses, including the one where Keaton was employed. She doesn't want to give her name yet. She'll talk if someone meets her in person. People online are crazy, she writes. They meet her at a diner off an interstate miles from Santa Aurelia. She sits in a corner booth, back to the wall, watching the door until she sees the badges. Her hands are calloused, nails short and uneven. She stirs her coffee too long before speaking. I heard your podcast, she says without preamble. The one about that guy with the books and the girls. It's not our podcast, Noah says. We just get the fallout. She huffs a humorless laugh. Yeah, that's how it works, isn't it? She tells them about long nights sweeping empty aisles, about the echo of her own footsteps, about the way some men would hang back after their shift ended, pretending to finish up while watching her. She mentions Keaton, quiet, polite, always gone right on time. But he had a friend, she says. Big guy, ball cap. They'd shoot the breeze by the loading dock. Once I heard them talking about that missing girl from your town, Emily. This was, I don't know, a month after she vanished. We had the news on the break room sometimes. What did they say? Lara leans forward. She looks down at her coffee, voice dropping. The big one said something like, they're never going to find her, not where she is. And your guy, Keaton, he didn't laugh, but he smiled, tight, like he knew something, like it was their joke. Did you tell anyone? Who was I going to tell? She snaps. My supervisor? Hey, the weirdo with the book and his buddy made a weird comment about the missing girl? Missing girls are always on the news. People are always saying stupid stuff. I filed it under creepy and kept it moving. Rent was due. She scrawls something on a napkin when they ask if she remembers the other man's name. Might have been Mark or Matt. I remember an M. They called him Mo once, but that might have been short for anything. All I know is he had a tattoo on his left hand, right here. She taps the skin between her thumb and index finger. Some kind of shape, like a cross, but crooked. Or a letter. It was quick, you know. You don't stare at men like that in empty warehouses if you want to keep things easy. A crooked cross, a letter, a man in a hat, a joke about a girl in the ground. They add it to the board. Unknown male. Warehouse dock. Possible M name. Hand tattoo. Another ghost. Sharper now, but still without a face. The DA doesn't love this development. We have to be careful, he says in the next meeting, the words grinding out. We start talking about a second suspect based on a coworker's foggy memory and an old podcast. We're blowing up a case we just tied up in a bow. We've got one dead definite predator. The public can live with that. You tell them there might be another guy, a living one, still breathing their air, and they're going to demand answers we don't have. They already are, Lara says. The Hart family, the 2001 family. They're not asking for comfort. They're asking for the truth. That's supposed to be our job. The truth, yes, he says. Speculation, no. So let's make it truth, she fires back. Give me a couple of analysts, a couple of days, access to old HR logs and payroll. Let us run down every M who had a shift overlap with Keaton, every guy with a hand tattoo who worked within 30 miles of that warehouse between 2001 and 2004. We either clear people or we don't. But we don't just sit in probably fine because the press office wants closure. The sheriff watches this back and forth, weighing the politics against the weight on his conscience. In the end, he nods. Limited scope, he says. You get your analysts. You run your cross-check. If you find something, we talk again. If you don't, we consider whether this line actually takes us anywhere useful. The search is ugly, tedious work. Not the glamorous kind that gets montages. It's spreadsheets and old scanned IDs and phone calls to companies that have changed names 3 times. They find 5 Marks, 3 Matts, 2 Miguels, 1 Maurice. 3 of them are dead. 2 moved out of state long ago. 1 is in prison for an unrelated assault. Half of them don't have, and never had, tattoos. The one who does is the least interesting on paper. Mark Owens. Lived in Santa Aurelia from 2001 to 2005. Warehouse job, no major disciplinary write-ups, no criminal record beyond a teenage shoplifting charge. Married briefly, divorced, no kids, started a small home repair business, moved 2 counties over. On his old employment file, there's a copy of his driver's license from 2003. The photo is bad, washed out, eyes half closed, but his left hand is visible where he's holding a form. There, between thumb and forefinger, is a small black shape, a crooked cross, or a letter, or both. They sit with that image for a long time. You could knock on his door and he could be a guy who once said a stupid thing to a coworker about a missing girl on the news, Noah says. Or he could be the guy who stood on a hillside with Keaton and held the tape while he rapped it. Either way, Lara says, he belongs in this room now. She prints the license, pins it up on the board next to the smudged image from the company picnic, next to the word unknown that doesn't quite fit anymore. In the space where a clean ending should be, there is now a new face. No charges, no warrant, no confession, just a man with a hat, a tattoo, a comment, and a place in the story that might be coincidence or might be design. For the people outside, the headline hasn't changed. The case is still solved. Emily Hart's killer is still officially dead. The town can keep telling itself that the monster has been removed. But inside the cold case room, the voiceover never says the end. It says, what if he wasn't alone on that road? It says, what if someone else can still be found? It says 19 years ago a girl disappeared and her story came back from the dead. Now, somewhere on a quiet street 2 counties away, a man named Mark Owens turns off his television when the Hart case comes on, stares at his own reflection in the blank screen, and listens for sirens that haven't arrived, not yet.